Good morning. This morning I'm still working with Paradigms, the book by Joe Barker that I discussed yesterday. And in this particular session, I'm going to talk about really in chapter 4, he talks about being able to identify when paradigms begin. And using that as a tool to be able to anticipate. It's backwards, but Paradigm by Joel Barker. And one of the things he talks about in chapter 4 is he talks about defining or beginning to identify as new paradigms are emerging. And what he talks about is that initially in a paradigm, it says you'll start finding new problems. You'll uncover problems that you can't solve. And then those unsolvable problems provide the catalyst for triggering a new paradigm. And if we take that information, or I took that information and overlaid it against the social paradigm, I started looking at society. And I started looking around, and it was, okay, there's some problems in society that the current paradigm isn't solving. What are the problems in our society that everyone says, well, we can't fix that? Those are the problems, he says, typically are the things that give indication to an emerging paradigm. And when I began looking at that, I began looking at community and what was wrong with community. And so much of what's wrong with community is the people. We got issues. We act in ways with each other that are damaging. They're counterproductive. You say something to me, I get triggered. I say something or do something back, and we both are worse off. So I started looking at that. Well, do we think we can fix that problem? Because that problem is a product of our trauma. Can we fix it? And if even today you begin asking people, can we heal trauma? People would say, yeah, we've got therapy, we've got some good approaches, but you can't heal it. We have a lot. I'm in an area that has a military base. We have a rather large military base here in the area. And so the effects of military, the effects of wartime, are one of the things that you hear about here in my community. PTSD is one of those terms that has become pretty common in society now. If you say PTSD, you assume that someone's talking about an extreme case of or extreme response to some sort of trauma that's impacting their lives. Those that are coming out of the military, we're seeing a higher number of individuals being affected by that. And if in our current society, I'm talking present day, if we talked about can we solve that problem, I think there still would be the overwhelming no. Can't solve it, can't cure it, it just is, and we just have to learn to deal with it. That's great. But as I began looking at, how we're going to fix community and looking at this model for paradigm shifts to really see if it gave some indications or some clues or at least some help in figuring out a strategic plan to move from there. In my 20s and 30s, I spent a lot more of my career time, my professional time in the consulting space. And so I was working with organizations that were trying to fix stuff. And so I became real passionate about not just doing stuff that was unproductive. We got these programs and we're using resources, financial resources, energy, volunteers to be able to fix stuff. But if it's not actually fixing something, then are we really just lying to ourselves? We pat ourselves and say, oh, that was so much fun. We had the food handout. And yes, we fixed the problem. And then the next month, those same people are there. The problem isn't solved, and then we sit around and we question why the problem isn't getting solved. In the consulting space, what we did, though, was just keep doing. We kept doing. We never said, why are these programs not working? Why am I now seeing the second, and I saw some communities where it's the second and third generation of the same family and the same kind of insecurity issues, whether it be food or housing or other kinds of services that oftentimes we think of when we think of social services. But in looking for solutions and really looking at the paradigm shift, I started playing with those unsolvable problems of society. And some of them that I think are worth talking about are, we talk about racism. We talk about being able to get along, especially in faith circles. We talk about healing and behavior, and we point out the behavior. Our news points out the behavior. Even as I've been the past few weeks on TikTok, if you jump in any of the rooms, chances are many of them will be talking about some of the problems. And these are problems that while we talk about them, we don't often have solutions that would say, if we have this solution, it will fix this problem. And so then we can move on to fixing something else as it relates to community. And about a little over a decade ago, I came in contact with a group of information that was heralded by Jesse Collins. Here's one of the books that I have on my bookshelf by Jesse Collins. And he started looking at trauma. He was a therapist. It seems from his writing that he was very passionate about healing trauma within the military complex, healing trauma as a result of terrorism. And he began playing with the rules. He saw a problem, and as Bill Barker says, shifters oftentimes look at problems from a very different vantage point, and they start solving problems, usually very small solutions, but they start using a totally different model, totally different set of rules. But the end results, usually at the beginning or the emerging of a new paradigm, is they start finding some solutions. Usually it's not global solutions. You usually can't implement this in mass, but they start finding little bits and pieces and solutions to problems. Well, as I began looking at how we fix community, one of the things that was core to my observation was that if we are looking at solving problems, getting to the core is the most effective way for us to solve problems. And if the core of our problems is our behavior, the way we interact with each other, that I traced back to our damaged selves, the ego stuff that we pick up from living in a traumatizing society, that if we were able to fix that, it would give us a much deeper healing process, give us a much stronger foundation. And then, like magic, some of the fires that we fight would also be corrected because we had dealt with the core. It's like having a gas fire and you fight the fire, but no one ever thinks to go and turn the actual gas off. Many times in society, especially in some of the circles with community development, healing, faith circles, interfaith circles, environmental circles, advocacy circles of all kinds, we oftentimes talk about the symptoms. In some of the discussions I've had in TikTok the past couple of weeks when trauma comes up, I talk about that as a symptom. Racism, is a symptom. Racism is a symptom of a value system that says that someone has to be better than someone else. And racism is one of those things where it usually is based on something that's arbitrary, like the coloring of our skin, the heritage that we come from, something that we absolutely cannot control. Once you get here, you come in the package that you've got. But we in society find things to make me better than you. If I live in a certain place and you don't, if I have income that's at a certain level and it's different than yours, if I have certain other things in my life that I think should make me better or more worthy or have more access, anything where I need for someone to be better than another, where I'm making these distinctions and I dismiss the inherent worth and dignity of each person, that runs the risk of having residual symptoms. We see them when we see racism. We see them when we see some of the transphobia issues related to gender. We see them when we see xenophobia. My country's better than your country. Anywhere we see someone making a difference where I have to be better than you based on some arbitrary thing that's not character. It's not talking about the ethics of how we live. It's not talking about the behavior or the characteristics of an incident or a moment and judging the worthiness of that behavior in some social context. We're talking about when I look at you as a person, and because I see you in a different shade that I am, because we're not even sometimes talking about outside of races, but if I see and make some difference. Sometimes, and if I'm being honest, within the Black community, it's things like, how was my hair done? What's my physical features? And sometimes my worthiness is based on whether or not someone sees me and assigns what they see as worthy in their mind. Anytime we deal with that issue, any way that it's expressed, it's the root of the same problem. And so as I began looking at that, because if we're going to be efficient with our time, our mental and our emotional energy in trying to create a better world to live in, try to really re-pioneer society into something that's a whole lot more sustainable than how we're living, then it seems to me, just from a logic flow, that if we get to the core, that would be the most efficient use of our energy versus fighting the fires and never really fixing the problem. If I want to talk about that, like what does that really look like in real life? And I've spent some time thinking about the civil rights movement. Why are we still having the same conversations that they were having in the 60s? I was not alive when the civil rights movement began. I'm a 70s baby. Those that are half a generation older than me were born into the boiling over of civil rights. Martin Luther King, the Black Panther movement, many movements, Malcolm X, that approached racism, the symptom. And they approached it in a way that, in my reflection, really was about behavior modification. Now, I am absolutely in favor of that. Sometimes when bad behavior is happening, you have to put some things in place that say, let's stop the behavior. Let's stop the behavior. Let's put some to be able to end that behavior. If that's happening, we put usually rules in place. If I don't agree with the values that you're saying, then the only thing that helps us to have something that gives us a commonality is usually rules. If I think for some reason that you are not worthy based on your skin color, instead of trying to change your mind, what we do is we put rules, we put behavior modification in place. It's not okay for you to discriminate based on these things. So don't do the behavior. We don't care what you think about the behavior, just don't do it. That's behavior modification, and I think that's valuable. Similarities are if someone's got a destructive behavior. Before we sometimes worry about changing their need for that behavior, we oftentimes say don't do it. We see that with addiction issues. We see it with things like alcohol. Just don't drink. Just don't use the tool, the destructive behavior, because it's got a negative effect on you. But at the same time, what I realized was just putting those behavior modification pieces in place in society, and we do it in lots of ways, especially in social services. If we just do that, some of the programming that I see in our community, it's like we assume that by magic, just doing that, someone's going to have a transformation. And all of a sudden, they're not going to want to do that behavior that's destructive. And I didn't see it happening. I saw us having programs, and programs were working by the methods of behavior modification. If there's something you want, and there's goodies that I have, if there's goodies that I have that you want, you will jump through certain hoops to get those goodies if the goodies are good enough for you. Likewise, we use negative behavior modification. If, excuse me, if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm going to punish you. And as long as that punishment is painful to you, you will not do that thing I don't want you to do. And we see it in lots of avenues of life. One of my first careers, I was in the tax business in my 20s. I owned an income tax franchise and we had operations, and I began to really, really understand more about tax law. And I realized that even the IRS uses behavior modification. And here's how they do it. They say, we'd really like for you to put money away into a self-funded kind of retirement program like a 401k or certain types of investment vehicles that are designed for saving towards your retirement. We want you to do it so much that we're going to put a little incentive. We'll allow you to put money in there, and we won't even take taxes out of that money in certain situations. Now, it's your money, and you can take your money out at any given time that you'd like to, but behavior modification says we really don't want you to do it. So if you take your money out of your accounts, we're going to charge you like a 10% penalty. We're just going to kind of slap you on the wrist and say, that's not something we want you to do. And yes, it's your money. And we're going to collect the taxes too, but we're going to put a behavior modification thing in place. Why? Because we really don't want you to take that money out of those savings accounts. Now, the why of that is a whole nother conversation, but behavior modification has been used in our society, and it's quite effective. If I drive too fast, I understand that there are laws that have told me that it's not okay to drive that fast, and if I get caught doing that, there is a punishment to pay for doing the thing they didn't want me to do. Now, there's reasons why they do it, because someone has said that if you drive under this speed limit, it's going to be safer in general. But if I don't agree with that value in practice, if I get in my car and I drive 80 miles an hour, my belief in the value might be there. Yeah, I might reasonably say, yeah, we probably shouldn't drive that fast on the open highway. There's other people and it's not safe. But in practice, I do it. Behavior modification makes me think about that action. If I do it and get caught, this could be very, very expensive. And behavior modification has indeed helped me slow down. That last ticket coming through Millen, Georgia, after the state passed the super speeder laws, and that ticket was going to be a very, very, very big ticket. It made me rethink whether or not I was in that big of a hurry to go anywhere. I had a tendency to zone out and be in my own little bubble, and sometimes my foot's on the pedal. Oftentimes my foot's on the pedal. But behavior modification helped me to modify that behavior, even though in my mind, for real, I am not as concerned about driving a little bit over the speed limit. I'm just going to be honest. It's a good thing. Good morning, Amadeus. It's a good thing to not drive over the speed limit, but behavior modification is what keeps me in check. But as I began looking at community, transformational change is the easiest, because in community, if we have to keep giving people goodies to behave in ways that we think are socially acceptable, or if we have to punish people for doing things that we don't think are within that line of community ethics that we put in place, then we have to do something more than just behavior modification. And when I looked at how do we do that, then how do we do transformation? Transformation really is about healing. It's about unlearning some values that we live by, and sometimes the values that we live by are destructive. If I think it's okay to be disrespectful to you, I'm on a slippery slope that says, which people can I be disrespectful to? Which people can I do damage to and harm? If I think it's okay to do damage to one group of people, then I've got a situational value system that's not real good for society, because you might be okay with disrespecting or causing harm to one group of people, but you would not want that behavior to be expressed towards you. We've got a disconnect there. And so in looking at the idea of who our paradigm shifters are, they start looking at the unsolvable problems. And for me, if I was going to do the deepest fix for community, what would that take? Well, I'd have to be able to fix the life trauma that we pick up, because that's the stuff that keeps us from being able to live those values of respect and dignity with each other. And we make up reasons. Because you hurt me. Because you hurt me, I can now treat you in a way that's going to cause damage to myself and to you. That's crazy. It's crazy, but we do it. I do it. I do things that are not beneficial to my body. Recently, I've been, this past year, I've been really working on healing some of the body damage from living a life way out of balance, taking care of my body. And so the food I put into my body has become much more important on the front side. But a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't feeling good. I had to run to the store and get something. I was on my way back home, and I said, I don't feel like cooking, and I just want some comfort food. For me, there are two things that are comfort food in my life right now, and don't judge me. I don't care if you do, but the vegetarian Fiesta burrito at Taco Bell and Little Caesar pizzas. Cheap pizzas with lots of cheese. Those are two of my, comfort foods. And so after having really been doing a good job with monitoring my eating, I'm reading up on, what's the guy's name? Eric, Dr. Eric, who talks about mucus-free eating. Some of his information piggybacks on Dr. Sebi's stuff about alkaline eating. But I really started purging my diet and sticking to things like fresh fruits and vegetables. And I drink a lot of smoothies and eat a lot of salads and use herbs and things like that to try to affect a regenerative work on my body. That's the healing journey that I'm on right now. This is kind of the new mountain in my life as far as, what are you healing right now? And I've been doing that, but on that day, in that moment of weakness, even knowing the effects of adding that much cheese back into my system. Fortunately, I am not lactose intolerant. Cheese is one of my favorite foods. I don't have an ethical issue with eating cheese or anything like that, but I understand that cheese causes inflammation in my joints, and I got bad knees. I got a replaced knee in my 40s. I blew out both of my knees at the same time because if you're going to do something, you might as well go for the gusto. I had one of them replaced and then COVID and decided not to replace the other and have been doing, herbal kinds of things and remedy kinds of things. And, like they tell you, if you lose some weight, you could take a little bit of weight off those knees, and that might help also. So all of those things are swirling, but milk, dairy, is one of those things that is said to cause inflammation in my body. Well, I know all of this, theoretically, logically, intellectually, I understand that if I go from, no dairy, I'm taking out all the inflammatory kinds of foods out of my diet. If I do that, and then go back to the behavior that adds, mucus to your body and inflammation to your joints and all of this stuff, the results are probably going to be damaging. Yeah, I've read some of those, and there's some styles that work. I was a keto fan, in the last decade, and I was a keto fan because I wanted to lose weight. This time around, though, because of some healing work internally, I'm okay with who I am, but my lifestyle wants me to be more fit and more healthy. I'm not losing weight because I'm out of sync with accepting my appearance. And I began looking at, well, what do I need to do? And even though I had really positive results with keto, the weight falls off, it melts off almost effortlessly. But something about that did not feel healthy for the chapter of life that I'm in. And so when I began looking, and really my value system for holistically making these changes, really put me on a much cleaner, natural, I don't want to be doing supplements or weird things that I have to do too much calculation. I need lifestyle kind of eating that I can maintain. That consistency. I don't like following rhythms. My life is one of those things. Good morning, Indy. My life is one of those things that change is the common. I don't have a set schedule. I'm kind of one of these airy-fairy. I follow my whims. I follow my inspiration. And I'm fortunate enough to have that freedom in life to be able to do that most of the time. But as I began to make those changes, like I understood and I saw the benefits in my body. My joints aren't hurting. I was on meloxicam I've been on meloxicam for like 4 years since I first started injuring my knees because of the knee that's not replaced. I was taking that stuff every day, and then it's like, man, this is probably not good for my kidney and my liver and probably other things. I want to get off of these meds and not have the dependency on these artificial things. I want my body to work well. So I know all this stuff. I'm doing the stuff. I got the magic bullet, and I'm going to the produce place, and I'm chopping stuff, and I'm doing all those things. But on that day, I was not feeling good, and I was determined that I was not cooking, and yet I still needed to eat, and I needed some comfort food. And so I left the store, and by store, I mean grocery store. I was going to the pharmacy to pick up said meds that I'm trying to get my body off of. And through the drive-through, because they make it easy for me, at Little Caesars I go. And I go and get the pizza. It's no big deal. I blow the $7 and I'm happy. And the next day or so, because I was fighting a cold, I think, some germs were going around, and I ate that pizza. And I ate the pizza. You know how pizza is. You eat it over, the next day or two. There's a piece here, and oh yeah, let me go heat up another piece, and then there's another piece, and within, a couple of days, I had eaten this whole pizza. Well, I then got really sick. This respiratory thing flared up. The cold that I was fighting, and I was doing a good job of fighting it. It felt like the day before a cold, but it was just mild, and if you just get through that, it'll be done. No, everything unleashed. That cold came down on me. The chest congestion came down, and I ended up in the emergency room the day after Christmas, which is a whole nother traumatizing experience. Our healthcare system, and just, woo, that was a whole thing. But got into my doctor, and then like a day later, when I was finally kind of in control of what was happening with my breathing and this chest congestion, I'm 50 years old, and they're sending me to a specialist because they're saying I might have asthma, which is not the vision, because my newest hobby is scuba diving, and so not being able to breathe when you're 60 feet under the ocean is not the vision. So I'm anxious to get this fixed up. That's a rabbit trail there. But I started thinking, and I was like, well, what did you do differently? What's going on that you got all this mucus in your system now? And then I started going back. I thought about that Dr. Eric book that I was reading about mucusless diet. And I thought to myself, I wonder if all of a sudden your system that had gotten desensitized from all of that stuff, you overloaded your system. And all of a sudden, all that dairy that you had been not intaking came into your system like a vengeance, and you got all this mucus and inflammation. I was aching, my joints were hurting, and I was like, So you knew better, yet you didn't do better. The transformation is happening, but that area, that boundary was not firm. If that boundary had been more firm, and I'm saying this not from a judgmental state, because I did it and I enjoyed it. That's my comfort food. Little Caesar pizza, and people talk about Little Caesar, and I don't even care. And Taco Bell's festive veggie burrito, whatever. Those are my comfort foods right now. And so I did it, and I own the consequences from it. But it was another example where my value system is transforming, but it ain't all the way transformed. Because if it had been, I would have had a much firmer boundary about putting something into my system that was going to cause a negative effect. It was not beneficial for my system. I knew it. I knew it before I did it, and yet I did it anyway. That is one example of kind of how trauma works. The damage in my mind that said that it's okay to put a little bit of poison in my system, because in reality, that's exactly what it was. Let me just put a little bit of poison. A little bit of poison is not going to be that bad. And in reality, our bodies are wonderful. On a normal day, a little bit of poison might not have been that bad, but a whole pizza worth of cheese over a day or so when my body was fighting something was not the best move. And as a result, it created more chaos in my life. So in a sense, my decision actually created a painful experience in my life. It was me. It wasn't anybody on the outside. There was nobody that forced me to do it. It was me. I put the poison into my system. I was the abuser on that particular day, and I still have some of the lingering effect of that. That was not the healing food that would have helped me continue to fight off whatever the cooties were that had come into my space. They were not things that added, bolstered my vitamin C or bolstered the nutritions that my body needed or vitamins in my body. It soothed an emotional need. It was the comfort food that made me feel better. It was I'm just treating myself really good. In actuality, it was, I'm going to give you a little bit of poison and it's going to feel good, but it's going to be detrimental to you. So that is one of the examples that's still in my real life of the healing journey that I'm on. Setting firm boundaries where I change my mindset to want the things that are good for me. If my mind had been fully healed in that area, I would have said, there's no way we're going to put poison into this body. There is absolutely no way we're going to do that. We're going to take ourselves home. We're going to make a salad. We're going to make a smoothie and we're going to keep it moving. Put some extra herbs in there, make you some herbal tea, get that mullein out and get that inflammation out of your chest. If my mind had been fully healed in those areas, that's what I would have done. I would have set those firm boundaries. Well, I started realizing that in community, healing works the same way. And I started thinking, if we could do healing, we could stop a whole lot of conversations. Well, why are they acting that way? They need healing. Well, we can't do that. We don't know how to heal trauma. What if we could? And so Joe Barker's example from his book Paradigms that talks about how paradigms shift, when I overlay that onto the social, it was, what are the unsolvable problems? Go find those shifters who are tinkering with the unsolvable problems. In community, the unsolvable problem at the core of any programming is trauma. It's our healing. It's healing our ego. It's the fears. It's the guilt. It's the insecurity. And trauma works in a certain way. Something happens. And we put up a defense mechanism. That fear, the insecurity, we pick up protective responses and we live from those unhealed places. But as I began looking, and I'm a researcher, I'm a tinkerer, let me find the unsolvable. If that's the unsolvable problem in society, I'm going to scan until I find someone that's been working on that unsolvable problem, because that's a shifter. Well, I did. I found Jesse Collins. Jesse Collins it's an old website. If you want information, I don't know if you can see this, but trauma resolution. He did a lot of work with trauma resolution. He started in the 70s and 80s, and he began in therapeutic settings saying things like, I changed the rules, just changed them. I'm a therapist, I got education, but I'm going to change the rules because that's not giving me the results that I want. I'm going to just change the rules and create a new system. And if I put this system together and began playing with this system, in my therapeutic research, I'm finding that the symptomology of PTSD is gone. From a research standpoint, from a therapeutic standpoint, he was able to say, clients come, I put them through a different way of healing, and they actually are cured. Now, if you take that at the surface, because of our current paradigm, it's like, yeah, it's not possible. It's not possible. The AA system is based on never being cured. You are an alcoholic forever. You may not be drinking, behavior modification, but you are always considered an alcoholic. So I understood that. That's the paradigm that I live in, and those systems are beneficial for a lot of people. But he was saying something different, and because I understood Barker's models, I said, this sounds like the characteristics of a shifter. He's tinkering with something that's unsolvable. His name is Jesse Collins. This is a very hard book to find, and I know it's probably reversed. But if you want to know more about his work, he was injured at some point and he put out this manifesto saying, here's all the information. There's a website. It's a 1980s styled website. A little bit later, it's real archaic because it hasn't been updated, but there's a ton of his information and his writings and some of the references that have come from his research, which I think is very important. And it's etiotropic.com. If you look up the word etiotropic.com. Jesse Collins, Trauma Resolution, ETM, TRC. Those are some of the code words that you can put in Google. It should take you to his website. I'm telling you in advance, if you have not been to a older version website, it is that. It is not the modern fangle, but if you click through that and look at some of the information, and I find his reading very difficult. I'm a person that likes using words. I like communication to be clear, and I find his reading sometimes very difficult. I have my own speculation. I speculate, neurodivergency just because it's very familiar to you. I can read it and I can understand it, but I see that it's just like it's like data plots. That it's sometimes it feels random. But here's the thing. I got exposed to this and began looking at it, and I was looking for some solutions to community, and I understood the idea about unsolvable problems, and I began to realize in the formula I was creating for how we fix community that healing trauma is one of those unsolvable problems, that if we could do that better, if we could do that well, we would be at a different place in the conversation of what to do with community and how to fix it. I began studying his work. I began using his work because my personal platform on solutions for community, it's not good enough if it doesn't work for me. I got issues. Does this help me heal the issues in my life? Because if not, then it's just theoretical stuff. And it's just, going to feed my ego. Oh, this is a great solution for you. Does it work for you? Well, no, doesn't work for me, but it should work for you. That's ridiculous. And sometimes we do that in community. Does it work for me? Does it provide healing for me? And what I started seeing was that the way he approached trauma, totally different set of rules. But he began doing this, other therapists began doing this, and he even did a study with the military officials. And if you dive through his website, you will find the referral letter that was given by one of the officials in the military that had been a part of some, seemed like trials of using this methodology. And the methodology seems to prove exactly what he said. It's a framework that says, if I teach you this framework, it will unweave the damage of trauma. Huge game changer. Huge game changer. And so because I'm a tinkerer, I said, let me see. When people talk about trauma, first of all, I had to go back and look at what trauma looked like and how trauma happens. And what I started realizing from his framework was, when I looked at what he was doing and how to do it, I started realizing that trauma is being misidentified. If you're in the space of healing now, the ACE, adverse childhood experiences, and it's a list and it's a formula, and if you check the boxes and your numbers are high enough, then you were traumatized and you should probably go get some therapy. And I realized that ain't true. It ain't true. It is not true. We have big trauma, but we have little trauma. Trauma is layer by layer by layer. It's a whole lot of things that build up to the hot mess of our life that we are usually when something happens, a crisis happens, and we say, I got to shift this paradigm of dysfunction in my life. For me, it was 20 years ago. I was 30 years old. I was in New York City. I had moved from the South up to New York City, and I'm a West Coast girl. So Southern living had become my adult lifestyle choice. And I moved to New York, and I was there in the midst of a hot mess of a relationship. And I said, this is crazy. Girl, you are the problem. You are on a hamster wheel. You're in and out of relationships, there's damage, and you're a hot mess. We're not going to keep going through life like this anymore. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. I don't know the solution, but this ain't it. I'm not going to keep doing this dysfunction, so something's got to give. I'm going to find me a book. I'm going to find something. And at the time, I was a church anarchist. I had resigned from the denomination of my upbringing. It didn't make sense to me. The foolishness that was happening didn't make sense to me. The principles didn't seem to make sense in the way that people told them. And I was going there playing the game. I was going and being a hot mess all 6 days out of the week. And then you show up in church in Jesus' name and everything's supposed to be okay. And I knew that I was the hot mess because I knew what my life was like behind closed doors. I began looking at what is trauma then. And according to the approach that he has, I was able to kind of glean a definition. And trauma was anything big or small that happened, even if it was for and only a brief moment, anything that caused me to pull back and put some sort of layer of covering on who I really am. So it was the children who said that my hair wasn't done right because my mama didn't know how to do hair, and my grandmother who owned the salon was too busy to ever do my hair. So it was the braid going sideways and the one going this way, and the kids laughed because it wasn't fashionable at the time. That little bit of trauma that then gave me hair issues going into adulthood. It's the little stuff. It's the big stuff too. We have the big words, and I don't think we can say them on there, but they start with R and M and I and lots of other kinds of things like that. The SAs and lots of those that we understand are trauma. If I had seen violence in my community, if I had seen those other kinds of things in the home, those become traumatizing things, but they're little things too. They're little things that we don't acknowledge really have an impact. One of the movies in pop culture that I like, and I love pop culture, there's so many messages sometimes that we can glean from them that really are beneficial for shifting our paradigm socially. But one of the movies is called Little. It's a young black girl. She's a nerdy science girl. You see her in the beginning opening of the movie where she's at the talent show and she's got a science experiment that she's showing at the talent show, and the popular girl embarrasses her. And then the movie switches. You see this moment of embarrassment that happens at about 8 or 9 in elementary school, and then you see this adult woman. And she is the proverbial mad black woman. She is the boss lady. She is independent, but she foul. She nasty acting. She's nasty to people. She's disrespectful. She got a chip on her shoulder, and everyone knows it. And you see this, and it's like that's what trauma really looks like. It's those big and little pieces that happen all throughout life. They happen unknowingly. It's the little kid that says something, and the day they say that, it's a joke. But on the day they say that, you're a little bit sensitive, and that little joke now gives you a complex about your eyes not being set in the right location, or your ears looking funny, or something else. And what we do is we then build up defenses. That's funny, and we joke it off. Or we make defenses. I now have a chip on my shoulder. I'm a little bit less open with you. I'm a little less honest with who I am. And then we do that. I tell people it's like if every time one of these little things happen, you put a shirt on and you just put one layer over another layer over another layer. You get to 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old. Oh, goodness. You get to 50 years old and you got all these layers of damage. It would be imagining you have all these layers on, and each one of these layers is a shirt, and you're standing looking like an Eskimo looking in the mirror. Can you see who you really are? No, you're buried up under there. You're in there. But all these layers are the damage and the defenses we pick up. And then I started understanding that if I understand that, then trauma happens all over the place. I got big trauma, little trauma. How do I deal with that stuff? I just suck it up. I just keep it moving. I put on these defenses, and those defenses work. But you get to a point where all of a sudden those layers become too heavy. And you look in the mirror and you can't see yourself. And what you do see, for me, at 30 years old, I looked in the mirror and I said, if I'm being honest, you a hot mess. You are a hot mess of dysfunction. And yes, you have wonderful characteristics, wonderful gifts and skills. Have been involved in business. I was a franchise, fastest growing franchise in the system. And you're doing these things. But when I looked in the mirror, I knew I was a hot mess. I was a hot mess. People see me now and I say, I know what I used to be. Want to make me cry? Ask me what I used to be. Ask me where I was before I got committed to healing. And I know where I was. I know where I could have been because of my damage. I understood that. Thanks, Amadeus. Jump in when you can. Back and forth. I understood that. But as I began to understand, then I have to go unweave those bits and pieces from life. I got to go start taking the layers off. And sometimes I can't get to this deep down layer until I get this outer layer off. But I don't know how. We talk about it, but I don't know how to do this. And then I learned the process. I learned a process, and it was a very simple yet very complicated system. But this guy said, this shifter, this paradigm shifter, solving the unsolvable, says, it surprised me too, man. And then I went and got some other counselors and said, try this out. See if you get 100. I'm getting 100% cure rate in my clients when I do this with them. And he got some other therapists. And they started doing the same thing. This is a different set of rules that you use. Totally different approach. You don't come from left field with some stuff. But as much as I would like to not believe it, because in a therapeutic setting, you can't heal that stuff. That's our paradigm. You cannot heal trauma. You just got to deal with it. Learn how to deal with it. That's what we do. And he said, the other therapist said, well, by golly, this should not work. This should not work. This should not work. I should not be able to do the same thing with all my clients, and they all get the same results. In a therapeutic setting where we're intentionally researching the outcomes, we're getting a 100% cure rate. Unsolvable problem. Well, because I too am a paradigm shifter in some areas of my life, I wanted to see. I understand theoretically, if I think that Barker's principles for discovering the future of business can overlay into the social paradigm and give us insight, if paradigm shifters characteristically operate in the same way in all emerging paradigms, if I find the person in the paradigm that I'm looking at influencing or being involved in that is working to solve the unsolvable problems, that's a beacon. It's a flag. I guess it's a green flag. It's a light that's flashing. It's blinking. It's the lighthouse. Use whatever analogy you want, but pay attention to that. Because this model says if we were to support that shifter, instead of running them out of society as the weirdos, if we were to support them, they probably are onto something. Well, over a decade later, I realized Collins was onto something. He was onto something. He was onto something, except my understanding of community says we have a 100% trauma rate. If we have a 100% trauma rate in society, we don't have enough institutions and enough time to train up enough therapists to do healing work in a therapeutic setting. The boxes of this paradigm are wrong. What if the unsolvable problem really is about healing trauma, but healing it on a 100% trauma rate situation? If society has a 100% trauma rate, and I propose that they do, if they do, then the therapeutic setting is not the setting that can get us out of this problem. It is a tool. There's absolutely an appropriate place for the therapeutic setting. But if we have a 100% trauma rate, the paradigm of trauma being healed only in the therapeutic does not get us to the answer. And so I started playing with the rules. What if trauma has to be healed on a community basis? What if we have to infect our community with people that have the capacity to be healing water to the community, social first responders that can respond to trauma and help people know how to heal from trauma? What if that were the case? As I looked at the unsolvable problems in our paradigm, if healing is one of those unsolvable problems, and I've got a shifter that's talking about I can heal it, then I've got to start looking at the problem differently. If we have a 100% trauma rate, and I believe we absolutely do, can we get 100% of the population into the therapeutic setting? The answer is absolutely not. There's no way logistically that we can do that. Absolutely no way possible for those numbers to ever work. So for me, coming from a consultant's mind, scratch it off the list. Yes, that is a beneficial tool for healing. But if we have a 100% trauma rate, that alone is not going to get me to success. Okay, so I got to change that mindset first if I'm really looking at solving the unsolvable. If we're going to solve the unsolvable, we got to first have a solution for how to do it, got to know how to heal trauma, and we have to be able to heal it where it has impact and can be a tool on the ground. You know, where the 100% of the people are that need it. So yes, therapeutic settings, fine. So in some of this problem solving of fixing community, one of the things that I did was I started looking also at faith. And oh my gosh, if you want to get into the biggest debate of your life, start talking about religion. Well, guess what? Unsolvable problem. We can't talk about faith in a way that's beneficial for most. If that too became one of the unsolvable problems, because faith is usually where we talk about value transformation. So we got another problem. How do we heal the 100% trauma rate? And how do we do it with using the things from our society that say their job is to shift values? And so I ended up in seminary, and instead of going the route that was counseling, I decided to go a route that seemed to be much more in line with my values for a sustainable community, and that was coaching. So during the time that I was working on my master's, we were able to do additional certification at the master's level. And I did a program track that was transformational coaching. Well, the idea of coaching really, the values of coaching really, they sparked me. The values of coaching sound sustainable. The coaching modality says, I can't fix you. It's not my job to fix you. It's your job to fix you. It's your problem. You fix you. However, because it's goodwill in society, it's goodwill for me to help you. It's goodwill for me to hold your hand, to guide you, to give you some tools, to support you, to be a support system for you, to do the healing on your own. But it's not my job to heal you, nor is that something that I can do. And that's a burden. When other people think that you can fix them, ooh, that's a burden that I don't want in life. So that modality worked for me. That idea that I could help you. And so I began thinking, if we have a 100% trauma rate in society, which I believe we do, if the therapeutic setting does not have the capacity to heal, if we have a 100% trauma rate, Ignite by Faith, thanks for jumping in. If you want to jump in to the conversation, let me know and I'll see if I can't buzz your box in. If we have a 100% trauma rate, we have to have a solution for that. We got to have a solution that actually works on healing trauma. If we know that we've got to do it so that we can affect the largest swatch of population, what kind of tools do we have? And the coaching tool seems to fit. Coaching is at the lay level. It's at the community. It's on the ground. When you do community work, you're talking about boots on the ground. Can you put it on the ground? Can you teach it? If he's got a idea and his set of rules are working to heal trauma, can we teach that to others? And so I began playing with this, and what I realized was not only did his framework provide a framework for healing trauma, but it also began to fix some of the other problems in society that are the unsolvable problems. When Joel Barker, and the book I'm kind of referencing is called Paradigms by Joel Barker. It's an old book about business, but I believe it gives a very good framework that overlays onto the social paradigm. But he says the thing about paradigm shifters is they start solving one problem, but then what happens is more and more problems start getting solved. Well, let's talk about the problems that I think the applications of this might be. And this is the thought process I was going through. If one of the problems that we have now, let me just kind of go on this, the foundation. One of the problems we have in community right now, in my community, is the rising self-inflicted unaliving. I think we can't say certain words on TikTok. So self-inflicted unaliving that's happening, and those numbers are growing, especially in certain segments of the population. Middle-aged white men, middle-aged white women, and the fastest growing group is young black men. So we're seeing a higher increase in these, and I've been through several trainings over the past couple of years, some certification trainings, and in every one of them, they say that once you get someone off the ledge, the next things that become relevant are people need processing skills that help them process trauma from life. They need roof over their head, food on the table, and a support system, community, connection. Processing skills. When I began looking at this tool and the applications of this tool, I found personally in my life, if I began using these tools, I started taking the layers of damage off of my life. Not only the layers of damage, but the behaviors that were the toxicities in my own life, the stuff I was doing that was toxic to myself that kept re-traumatizing me, even though the traumatic incidents had happened at a previous point. I started realizing that as I began doing the healing, going to the core, this is turn the gas off. Don't just keep fighting the fires. Turn the gas off. I started seeing that the behaviors took care of themselves. I got to the point where some of those healing journeys, the healing journey I was on, the layers would come off, and then all of a sudden I'd look around and it was like, you're not doing that dysfunctional thing that you used to do just as a natural trigger response. You're not triggered in the same way anymore. Those behaviors begin to change. Your boundary setting begins to change. You're not putting yourself in dysfunctional relationships as much anymore. And I began to see that growth. But then the applications, this is where paradigm shifters, the problem they solve begins then solving other problems. I started realizing that if I use this framework of thinking, of processing in real life, I could be in a situation in real time. This is not in the therapeutic setting where I'm going and doing reflective healing. This is if I began to use this framework in real time as my filter. How do I see the world? I see it through this framework. I began realizing that this tool kept current life from traumatizing me. Mind blown, mind blown, mind blown. Wait a minute. Hold on. You mean we could heal trauma and create a way so that life isn't as traumatizing as it would have been in my old way of thinking, so life becomes less traumatizing? I'm going to look at this. I'm going to watch this. I'm going to play with this. I'm going to tinker with this. And as I began tinkering, I also realized, as I began to use this framework for real time, I started realizing that my impact on people was such that when I interacted with people, even if they weren't healing, that my interactions with them left them better. I became healing water to people that interacted with me, even if they hadn't decided to do any healing. So the information from Jesse Collins' work, yes, he explains it in this compilation book. This book is very hard to get, and it's very expensive if you can find it. I think this copy of it cost me $150. He has a lot of information if you really want to dive into someone who makes a claim. And I'm just saying, he makes a claim. He makes a claim that I have seen to be accurate, but you can evaluate it for yourself. Go to his website. It's an old website that's not maintained, but if you dig and if you're willing to dig through the information and the style of writing that he uses, the website is etiotropic, etiotropic.com. It's a word that means it's a style of therapy that says, let's not deal with the symptom. Let's go straight to the core. Let's go to the core. Let's fix the core and let's see if the symptoms don't miraculously fix themselves. But the implications I started seeing was, wait a minute, hold on. One of the problems that we have in that area of self-inflicted unaliving is that people don't have the skills to process what's happening in life, and so they blow up. It's road rage. It's domestic violence. It's lots of ways that we see. If we look at what's on the news and you say this was somebody that did not have the capacity to process what was happening. It stored up, and it became an angry outburst in a way that usually was destructive for themselves and for the people around them that were a part of that expression. But what they're saying the fix is people have to have processing skills that help them process life in ways that are healthy. I started realizing, wait a minute, hold on, this framework that this guy was looking at, how do we fix damage in the military environment, PTSD from a military standpoint, terrorism and some things like that he was working with. But if this becomes something that works in real time, is this something that can be taught that helps people have the processing skills? We talk about critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and processing, life processing skills. This framework deals with all three of those. Now, again, we're talking about paradigm shifting. So we're talking about this obscure little blip of unpopular. This is not pop culture, but there's this man who was perhaps, in my definition, a shifter. And he said, I can fix trauma. I started playing with this, and over the decade plus that I've been playing with this, I started realizing the applications are such that this could teach people how to increase their emotional intelligence. When we talk about emotional intelligence, well, you just can't teach somebody that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So sometimes I come into conversations when people are having those conversations. Yes, you can teach people how to increase their emotional intelligence and how to heal their trauma. And you can give them a framework that gives them a way to be able to process the things that happen in life in this traumatizing society we live in every day. Most people, if I have that conversation, they'll say it's not possible. And I say, yes, it is. I've been playing with this. This man has been working on this since the 70s. And he said, this works. And I started looking at the applications of this. This works. But can we replicate this? My first business was a franchise. Replication is the key. You want to maintain quality in your business and you want to do it over and over again with multiple businesses. Replication, the franchise model. Can we replicate this? Does it work for me just like it works for you? And so I started playing with Jesse's work. I started playing with this idea of if we're going to fix community, we got to fix people. That's the most efficient way for us to fix community, fix people. Because if we fix people, we fix the police, we fix politics, we fix the government, we fix the environment. We fix it because those people are now living from a healed perspective. They're living from a place that's not a product of their damage. But if we could do that, would our conversations be different? And I've been on TikTok a few weeks, you guys, and I absolutely believe so. I've been browsing. I'm the lurker. I browse in. Sometimes I jump in and have a conversation if it feels like it's beneficial for me and doesn't leave me harmed in the process. But I've been hearing the conversations, and so many of them have said, we can't fix community unless we help people heal. Got to have a foundation. And then I say, well, what are your suggestions? And most of these conversations go, I don't know. I think it's an impossible problem. As I began to understand how paradigms work, and I began to use the practices that he says for identifying who are those shifters and what are they doing? They're solving the unsolvable problems that if we could solve would change the paradigm. And so when I put Barker's information together from this book, and I'm talking about a book, I think it's from the 80s, and I take this information and say, if you replace everything he says about business with social paradigm, and then I take the information from Jesse Collins that says, what if we started solving the unsolvable problems? What if that solution began to help us find solutions to more of the unsolvable problems? We start the conversation at a different place. And so for me, this is part of the social tech toolbox that I work with now, with individuals, with groups, with faith leaders and community organizers, with intentional community builders, people who are physically saying, we've got to physically build spaces that provide us the opportunity to live from a healed perspective, because that's difficult to do in our current paradigm. You want to talk about putting your defenses down, take that ego layer off of defenses and go live. You'd be a fool to do it in current society without a really strong support network. You'd be foolish. It would be unwise. I would not recommend it. Get all your healing and take all those layers off and take all your defenses down and go into a world that's playing by a different set of games. You will be thrown to the wolves. But doing that in a safe environment and building physical communities is one of those places that those who are social paradigm shifters are looking to go and tinker with reality. Can we do a social experiment in real time, in real life, of learning how to live together and live together in ways where it is life affirming and supportive, and you can be your most authentic self as you heal? And again, that most authentic self is one layer at a time. It's a lifetime of healing. It's healing one bit at a time, one piece at a time. But can you go live where you are intentionally working on that progression? And starting that with some of these foundational tools, and I call it social tech. We have building tech and water tech, and I've been in a lot of these spaces. I've been in the intentional community space. I've been looking at the tinkerings. How do you take raw land and create community out of that? How do you go from that standpoint? I've looked at things like housing. How do we do housing sustainably? Do we have some more models? Do we have new technology in construction? And we do. I went into food. Putting a roof overhead and food on the table are two criticals. That buys your mental freedom to even think about healing when you got a little bit of stability going on in life. And economics, because economics is how we sometimes gain stability, because we're still in a cash economy. We still trade money for stuff, so you got to have money. I'm not a Pollyanna where, oh, we're just going to live in love and da-da-da. No, 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 no. I'm a realist. You got to take money. Because if you want to go buy land, you got to have money. If you want to go build housing, you got to have money. If you want to eat, you got to have money, or got to have money to buy the equipment to help you be able to turn that land into food. I've played in some of those areas. And I think that there is a strategic order for things that our communities need to be concerned with if we're going to see those cogs start to turn. But I think as we start building those changes into some of the settings in life, we'll begin to do exactly what paradigms do, and that is begin to turn the cogs of change. One of the interesting things that really freed my mind from paradigms was, in my mind, paradigm shifting is a gradual process. You kind of slide into something, and Joe Barker says that's not the case. He says paradigms die. You have a paradigm, and eventually that paradigm is going to die. There's going to be a crisis at a certain point that's going to change the masses. Crisis shifts paradigms faster than anything else. There's going to be a crisis that happens in the social space, and all of a sudden people are going to have to live differently. He says what happens is, as this paradigm, even as it's increasing in effectiveness, it's going up the hill, and eventually it gets and it plateaus, and then it plummets and it stops working. At the same time, a new paradigm starts emerging. It's not popular. This guy started fixing one little problem in one little sector of his work. Not popular. But as you begin to work with that system and work the kinks out of it, it begins to start answering more solutions, more problems in society. It starts giving more solutions. And it eventually increases to a point where it's a pretty doggone system that could work. You've tested it out in real time. It's not just theoretical. And as that new paradigm emerging, it's happening as the other paradigm is dying. And what happens is all the rest of the people that's on that paradigm jump and they move into this new paradigm. And they learn this new paradigm because oftentimes crisis has happened. It's too painful now to stay in this old way of doing things. And so we've got to find a better solution, and we're seeing that socially. All of a sudden, the dysfunction in society that we used to be able to tolerate has gotten to the point now where we say we ain't tolerating it no more. COVID changed it. We're seeing that. People probably for the first time, for a lot of people in a long time, realized what it was like to get off that hamster wheel, to not get up in the stress of getting up to commute, to go to this job, to be around people that you really may not like and who may not treat each other very well anyway. That if I got to go to work at this job that I really don't necessarily like, that's not really sparking my thing on the inside. I think the prophet Erykah Badu says, work ain't honest, but it pays the bills. She's a prophet. Brilliant. Sometimes we're doing it. Do you really want to get up and go there? No, but you do it anyway. Work is not honest. If I'm being honest, I don't want to be here, but I need my bills paid. And people, for the first time, I think in a long time, were able to get off that hamster wheel. I may have to go to work, but doggone it, I ain't fit to put clothes on. Not fit to put clothes on. If I got to put a bra and panties on, it's now too valuable to my mental health. I can't do it. Can't do it. And all of a sudden, crisis, the whole paradigm shifted. All of a sudden, jobs that demanded that you get up out of your house, put on clothes that you got to pay for the upkeep of, get in your car, put gas in the tank or unplug it, take yourself away from your home environment, which oftentimes is safer than the world out there, and provide a service that you could have done from your couch or the middle of your bed and your computer. All of a sudden, we just figured it out. Crisis hit. It was too painful for jobs to shut down, so they had to figure out a solution. And all of a sudden, in weeks, solutions went. Whoever is the owner of Zoom, their heads probably were spinning in circles going, we didn't even know. We didn't even know that our time was getting ready to come. Our time was here. And before you know it, the paradigm has shifted. It's shifted so far that there's some people try to get them back in your offices. Try to get them back in your offices. Try to get them back in your offices when things like social media has provided an alternative economic system for them. Our paradigm has shifted. In society, some of the tolerances that we had for behavior, whether it's police violence, whether it's the inner workings of money and politics, whether it's any of these other things that we see, all of a sudden, they are no longer tolerable. We're seeing the shifting. We're seeing the creaking where the paradigm that we live ain't working for us anymore. The paradigm that I grew up with, my mother, I talked about it yesterday. You go to high school, you get your diploma, and you go get you a college degree because you got to have at least one to be able to compete on the same playing field as other people of the lighter persuasion without it. I learned that. I learned that paradigm. There was no question about what I was going to do after high school. You go to college. That's what you do because you have to have that paper just to be on the playing field. That's what I learned. That was my mother's generation. That's the generation that was learned from the generation that came out of Reconstruction for blacks in the first communities when they were first able to buy property and build houses for themselves and develop communities. We talk about Tulsa, but all of the black post-Reconstruction communities look just like that. The out for the children back then and the whole HBCU system was developed during that time. The come up was going to college. And so for several generations, that's what was preached. That was the paradigm. Try running that by these youth today. Tell them that $100,000 to $200,000 bachelor's degree is going to be the answer for them, and they can then take that and go get a job that's going to pay them $20 an hour, $40,000 a year. You can't. There's some youngsters that are not buying that paradigm anymore. The paradigm has died for them. But there's some that are still on that bandwagon, and not saying that education is not a thing. I have chosen education. I love education. I'd go back and get a PhD if it didn't cost so much. It's not cost effective. But the paradigms we're seeing in real time the past 2 years, literal paradigms changing. We're getting ready to change the whole money paradigm. We've been inching there, but we're getting ready to change it a big way. What would happen if your cash money was no good? Literally, if your cash money was no good. We don't use cash money that much now, but what happens if you no longer had the ability to have a private financial transaction where someone wasn't monitoring how you were spending your money? Talking about being uncovered? So life is changing right before us. The paradigm is shifting. And what Joel Barker says was, what if you could anticipate what that shift was going to be and start planning for it in advance? For me, my agenda is about how do we repioneer society. When I look over the years from a consultant's mindset of if I were going to fix community, you do integrated, sustainable community development work. You look at lots of things and how do you find fixes for all those moving parts that have to be moving at the same time and put it into a system that can be implemented. That's what I did as consultant. And I'm in my retirement now. I'm going back into that work specifically around this issue. But what if we could anticipate that there's going to come a time in society where people no longer were going to operate well in that dysfunction. And people were going to, because they feel it feels bad to feel messed up and damaged. People were going to demand a change in life. We got to live differently. And what if we started seeing that need 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and started working towards solutions? I present Jesse Collins was a paradigm shifter. He fits the description that Joel Barker gives in this little old business book from the 80s. I think it's from the 80s. Let me look and see when this book actually came out. This book was published 92, so maybe a little bit later, 92. So this is about a decade before I came into contact with it. 90s, think about the world in the 90s. He was talking about a different time, talking about business, but socially. If I start looking for the paradigm shifters, if I start anticipating the future, how much more prepared will we be when crisis really does come? And so I'm really passionate about healing because in my looking, and I've been trying to find solutions for community, there is no way that I can see us getting to a sustainable end if we don't have healing as the foundation and begin putting the investment into healing in everywhere we can, everywhere. If there's 100% trauma rate, everybody can get some of this healing. Because you need it. If we're being really honest, you need it. I know I need it. Healing will be a lifetime for me. Because even the healing that I've experienced, I know I still got issues. catch me on a bad day. I know the potential that I have. I can go tornado in 10 seconds if it weren't for some of these things in place, because I still have to do behavior modification. Sometimes I say stuff in my head so that I don't say it out loud, just to be able to get it out, when I know it's unhealthy kind of interactions. If I were to say what I'm really thinking right now, so let me go get myself somewhere and sit down and be quiet so that I can process through my trauma, because I know this is just my own trauma. That's why I'm needing to be judgmental right now. I'm being judgmental to somebody else about their situation that I have no control over because my ego. I'm going to go work on that right now. I'm going to go in the corner and work on my stuff because, I'm the hot mess of dysfunction right now. Let me just go sit down somewhere. And I've learned to do self-modification, self-behavior modification so that I'm not causing trauma. Not only that, but then I started realizing that according to some of these models, trauma happens anytime my values are violated. Anytime someone conflicts with my values, anytime something conflicts with my values. If I believe that there's worth and dignity in every person, but I treat you in a way that does not show that I believe that I have worth and dignity, that's a point of trauma in my life. And what I started realizing was trauma happens when you do something to me that violates my values, but trauma also happens when I do something to me that violates my values. So that if my value is that I should tell the truth and I lie, I am causing trauma to myself. My first entrance into healing was once I began to understand that I can't fix everybody in the world and what they do to me. What I can do is not traumatize myself. So we gonna stop lying to ourselves, because every time we lie to ourselves, we are creating a micro trauma in our life. We understand microaggressions. Little bitty things that like a gnat, one little thing, go to a job where there's microaggressions at place. It ain't going to be one big thing that happens. It's going to be a whole lot of little things. It's going to be them people that move your coffee cup, or they go and say little things about you behind your back. It's going to be little things. Micro trauma works the same way as big stuff and little stuff now that add up. It all adds up. It's cumulative. And so my start in healing was the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be honest with myself. And I realized when I get to be honest with myself, some people are not okay with that. But then I realized also that if I'm, and if you've got something that you'd like to say and want to join in this conversation, I'd love to have you in the conversation. Put a note there and say, hey, I got something to say, so that I know it's not one of those spammers. I can't tell. And yesterday, my first TikTok live, I got somebody that was, I think, foreign person that I couldn't get off so easily. So if somebody wants to jump in the conversation, I'd love to be able to talk with you. So do the interact button and ask to join in. But if you put a message in the chat, I can see that and say, hey, I'd like to say something, or I'd like to be a part of the conversation live, so that I know it's not just a scammer. So if you've clicked the box adding to join in and I don't know that you're a real person or not one of those scam artists that come in, then just put a note in there and I'll be glad to join you into the conversation. So just put it in chat that, hey, join me in, or, put me in the box or something like that so that I can see it. Otherwise, I'm kind of going to ignore the interact buttons that pop up on here. I've seen several of them come in, but like I said, I don't know if it's the scammers. So put a note in there if you want to join in the conversation. But once I began to understand that, and I started, my first stepping stone was, I'm going to be honest with me, because if I start lying to me, I'm going to be creating more trauma, and then there's more stuff I got to work on. I got luggage packed in attics of stuff at the time. I was 30 years old. This has been 20 years ago when I started this, non-negotiable in my life. But I started being honest with others, because I realized if I'm honest with myself, at least I won't create more trauma for myself. Now, you may be upset, but I also realize I am not responsible for you. Nope. I am not responsible for you. Not responsible at all. Now I'm responsible for my behavior. If I'm doing stuff that's going to harm you, I'm responsible for that. But if I am being honest with myself, because my first responsibility is to take care of me. If I'm being honest with me and doing my job of self, your job is to not cause you no more harm, because you got too much stuff you got to work out already. If you do that, that's the stepping stone, because at least we're not going to be adding more baggage to it. I realized that when I got honest with myself, I felt wonderful. I'd say what I meant, and in the most loving way that I could. And that's tempered with, I was a hot mess now. I was a hot mess. So I was doing the best I could. But when I did that, I felt fine. You're upset because I said no. I can't come help you with your project for free. No, no, I don't want to. I don't want to. Nope, I don't want to. But you can help us. You're just so wonderful. I probably am. And I probably could help you, but I'm not going to. Why? Because I don't want to. And I have to be honest with myself. Because if I start lying to myself, then I add more baggage onto the thing. And I got too much stuff to work on. I got too much stuff. I'm trying to live life and get the most out of it. And I got a whole lot of dysfunction that's got to be worked out because I'm part of my trauma. I'm 90% of the trauma that happens in my life because I keep doing stuff that's destructive. Every time you ask me if I'm okay and I say no. No, you say, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. Lie, 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 lie. And so what I started doing was I started saying, do you want to know how? You said, are you okay? Do you actually want to know the answer? And people would look at me. Oh, you just wanted me to say I'm doing okay. Okay. Or I'd start saying things like, you say, how are you doing? My head is hurting today. I'm not really feeling my best. Oh, did you really want my honest answer? And I started doing that just as a lifestyle choice. Because what that did was it reminded me of my values. Girl, don't start lying to yourself. And don't start lying to other folks. Because if you lie to other folks and your value system says don't lie, lying is not good, you have violated your value system. Stop violating your values. Well, I had to start learning what my values were. I started having to listen better in conversations. And people would say things like, we want you to come and be a part of this project and we want you to give your time. And I'd say, so what you're saying is you would like for me to do something for you. Is that what you're saying? Well, yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clarifying. And you would like for me to take my time and my resources and give them to you, right? I just want to clarify. And they'd say yes, and I'd say, let me think about it, because I need to decide if I want to use my time, my emotional energy, and my resources for that project. Let me think, because I want to give you an honest answer. Because if I don't, I'm going to feel some resentment. If I go on and do it because you asked me to, because maybe my ego needs to be stroked, and I go do it, guess what? I'm going to feel resentment, and that resentment is going to be trauma in my life. Which one of us am I responsible for taking care of? And so oftentimes, and I'm gotten real good, because now, having retired, I have the time, you have the time. And I'll say something like, I absolutely have the time. However, doing that in the way that you expressed, especially for free, is not where I want to spend my energy. So thank you for the offer, but no. And people look at me strange, and I feel nothing. I feel absolutely okay. But, and one lady tried to convince me, but this fits into your mission for life. And I said, it sounds like it does. You're right. Ain't no argument. It absolutely does. Hi, Kenny Pops. Welcome. Absolutely fits in, but I don't want to do it. If I'm being honest, I don't want to. I don't want to. And I'm trying to live my life where I do the things I want to do, because if I'm doing things I don't want to do, even if it's in micro ways, it's creating trauma in my life. And as I have learned more about this, I've learned his system, as I have begun putting those things in place and healing so that I could put new boundaries in place in my life, I don't have some of them issues. I don't have some of those issues. If what you're asking me to do violates my values, the answer is no. No. And there's things that I do that aren't the things I prefer to do, but I have a conversation with myself. Is this something you are choosing to do? Because if I'm choosing to do it, then it's not going to violate my values. I have the right to decide how to spend my life energy every day. Every single day I can choose. I have people that say, well, I have to get up and go to work. No, you don't. There is absolutely nothing that makes you go. If you don't understand you getting up and going by choice, then that going to work will cause trauma for you, because you're going and doing something that you think that somebody's making you do. We become the traumatizers. And so I started saying, I own my time. If I'm doing it, even the stuff that I've done that I go, that sure didn't like I wanted it to, but I chose to do it. I was fully invested in the choice. It was my choice. No regrets. No regrets. I began understanding that as I began using these tools for healing, I was in full control of my life. There's nothing that somebody else could do that impacts my life. You may do something, but I get to choose whether what you do traumatizes me or not. And as I'm doing that in real time now, it hits me in real ways. And this is where I'm very careful when I talk about helping people heal. I'm careful because I don't want to do harm. I want my conscience to be clear. I do not want to do harm. But in my own life, I've had to see whether I can walk the walk. Let me tell you a story. This is a real story from my real life. If you want to see the details, I've written about it. If you find me, Lorana Hughes on Medium, I have some articles that I've written, just the inner workings. I write the lessons that I learn. I try to capture them because I think they can be good for me, but sometimes people can learn from experience, from other people's experience, and not have to go through some of the obstacles in life if you learn from other people's experience. And that's, again, not abroad, that's sometimes. But I wrote about this. It's called, if you Google the unsolicited eulogy, if you just Google that, the Medium article will come up. But I have one of those families that, let me see, toxic, dysfunctional. We had issues. A strong matriarchal family, grandmother, mother, and they both died almost 2 years ago within a couple of days of each other, literally. It was the end of an era in my family. Women that were strong, the proverbial strong black women. My grandmother was a business owner back in the day. You know, where not only was she a business owner, she owned the building and half the block that the building sat on. Amazing that she could do that in the culture that she lived in at the time. My mother chose education, and she became a nurse, and she retired from that career and became a counselor, went and got another degree. These were professionals. These were business leaders in the community. These were leaders in the church, in Jesus' name. And yet, they were women who didn't do healing. They were bitter. We got some family dirt that they refused to deal with, and guilt works in interesting ways when you're not dealing with it. And my mother was a part of some of the toxicity that I had to heal from. But I had a situation. I was estranged from my mother up until the week before, where I went and made one last attempt to make peace, not knowing that she would be dead almost a week to the minute from us sitting there and having that conversation. That conversation where I said to her, this is about you having the freedom. I don't need any apologies or anything. I'm responsible for my healing work. This is so that you have the freedom, so that you're not expecting, that you're not thinking that I need to give that. And the situation unfolded where my mother died. We had just gone out for my grandmother's memorial and got home, and a week later my mother died, so we were back out to California for her funeral. And my mother, and the bitterness she had, was bitterness that played into my relationship with my brother. And so I was just as estranged from my brother as my mother, and my brother made a decision, because he was in charge, that was a choice my mother made, to not allow me to speak at my mother's funeral. Now, of the two children that my mother has, I am the speaker. I'm the one that does public speaking and teaching, and that just, is part of the dynamic that my family has known me by. And I have adult children, and my children, when they found out what he had done, they were worried. Because my children understand that you have a choice on how you're going to respond, and they know that their mother could use all of her words. And if I wanted to be a tornado, I could show out in this place and stop this from happening. I had to make a decision, though. As I sat there, I was angry. I didn't even know why I was angry. You're just angry because that ain't right. That ain't right. There was a whole bunch of things with this little old funeral home, because there was some beef with the church, and this church that my mother had been involved in, we weren't having it there, but I wasn't able to speak. Now, because I'm who I am, I wanted to make sure that if given the opportunity, that the words I said were loving, that they were honest, but that they were loving, and that they were kind, but that they were honest. And so days before that, I really did my purging, was using all the tools I had to really purge all of that hurt and anger and bitterness, any of it that was left in me. And I sat the morning before and was able to finally write out the words that I would speak if given the opportunity. And as I sat there, I'd written it through tears. through tears and music, my headphones in, music, early wee hours, because this was private and I didn't want to expose the rest of the family to that. This was a personal stuff I had to get through. But on the napkins, as I sat there with tears going down, sitting next to my coffee cup, I had written out the words. And because I said I might end up crying, I'm going to take this napkin, and if this ink gets wet, it's going to blur it. And I don't want to go off rail where my emotions get the best of me and I end up being part of the toxic history, legacy that's in my family. And I put them in a Ziploc bag to protect them in case my hands got sweaty, and I put it in my pocket. And as I sat there and we realized what had happened, that I had been written out of the program entirely, completely. And we went and spoke to my best friend, my daughter of adult children, as an advocate to say my mother is not in the program, to speak at her mother's funeral. And they came back and gave me that, and I sat still. I'd learned these things, but could I live it? I talked about healing, but is there a test that's any greater than this? And I sat there, and his process is a step process. It says, first of all, what happened? I have been told that I will not be able to speak at my mother's funeral. My brother has decided they've written me out of the program entirely. That's what's happened. And the process that I've learned for healing says, how are you feeling? I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling disgusted because this family stuff that just keep on going. It's my mama after she's died. This is the pettiness that continues on, because the animosity wasn't because I had specifically done something to her. It was her guilt about what she had done or not done as it relates to me. And I knew how guilt worked. But this is some of that pettiness. I'm feeling irritated. I'm feeling disgusted once again. I'm feeling exhausted from the pettiness of this. How you gonna have all these pastors up speaking and these folk that ain't even kinfolk speaking and on the program, and you not gonna let, she got 2 children, you and me, and how you gonna not let me speak? And then I said, those are your emotions. Anything else? Nope, that's it. I'm feeling just real disgusted. I ain't even really angry now. I'm just disgusted by the foolishness. And I'm doing this mentally, but I'm sitting really still. And my children are watching me and they get nervous because they know I could go there if I really wanted to. I just choose not to. But I went through the steps. The next step was, what are the values? Is there any value that's being conflicted? Because I understood. I teach it. The trauma happens if your values are conflicted. Something that upsets you just upsets you. You be upset as long as you want to. Get over it. And when it's done, it's done. But there's no trauma. It's just uncomfortable emotions. Trauma happens when there's values. Let me see. Is there any trauma? What are your values? Your mother has the right to decide who's going to plan her funeral. I believe that. That's my value. Your mother has the right to decide. Your mother put your brother in charge of her funeral. Your mother has the right to decide that. I believe that. Your brother then therefore has the right to do this funeral however he wants. Do you believe that, Lorana? Well, yeah. She gave him that privilege. That's her privilege to give. He gets to decide how he wants. I don't have to understand why. I know why. I know why. One of the issues and the animosity with my brother is I'm the sister that's always right, because I am. I'm thorough. I go check stuff out. I got some neurodivergencies that make me real good at that. He has the right, and for whatever reason he's doing it, ego, I understand, but he has the right to decide that I'm not going to speak at this funeral. I said, if I believe that, to demand this platform to say these words that I have to say, that I've written down to be able to say, if I were to make that demand would cause me trauma. Because it would go against my value system that says my mother has the right to choose how she wants this funeral to go down. And she has the right to appoint my brother as the keeper of those wishes. My brother has been given the authority to make the decision for whether or not I speak at this funeral. And if he has decided that I am not to speak, I honor that. That does not conflict with my value at all. And in that 10 minutes that I sat there and let the emotions play, because if I ignore the emotions, that is a lie. If I say I'm fine and I know on the inside I'm doing the woo, 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 talk myself down off the ledge in an illogical way, because I haven't even processed why I'm mad. Why am I? in those few minutes, I let that emotion subside and got to the next step of this healing process that Jesse Collins says. And it was, is there a violation of my values? No. And I realized in that moment, in real time, in the funeral hadn't even started. I said, my brother is not violating any of my values. So I can decide if I want to be upset about this situation. That's my choice. I can choose to stay in my emotions if I want to. And I sat there, and on the inside, this is where people see I have that resting face that people think I'm always thinking about something real serious. And sometimes it don't, because I'm a jokester. And so there's always some funny joke going on in my head. But I sat there, and on the inside, my inner belly had a little chuckle. I said, girl, you doing good. This healing is working for you. Because the conversation with my mother the week before was my mother told me. She said, I can't see where healing has done a bit of good in your life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray for you. And I said to her, thank you. Because I understood that me being able to even say that, my healing was working. And so I sat there and I chuckled. I kind of chuckled. That thought went back through, and I thought to myself, girl, I don't care if nobody see it. Your healing is working for you. Because in 10 minutes, something that could have been traumatizing for the next 50 years of my life was no longer an issue, because I realized there was no trauma there. There was nothing happening that conflicted with my value, and I get to decide my emotions. And in that instant, I wasn't even disgusted no more, because I understood that my brother was doing the best he could. He really was. That was his best. Whatever he needed to do to feed his ego. And he got up there and had some little silly, corny joke that he said about some trip when we backed up the toilet in Los Angeles as kids or something that wasn't even relevant. I was just like, wow. If I had stood up there with these eloquent words, it would have been another situation perhaps that would have fed into his ego and his insecurities. He gets up with this silly joke, and his sister comes up with a well-prepared eulogy that really was important. And if you want to find it, go on Medium or Google an unsolicited eulogy, and I tell the story. It's literally the words that I would have read that day. And then I realized in reflection, that wasn't your congregation. Those weren't people that could even hear your words. Your words were for you. Your words were for you. Your words were for the people that know your work, your people that know what you've been through in real life. I finished a book this year that talks about what trauma healing looks like, but it's real. I had a friend that's known me for about a decade, and she knows some of the inner life of my mother and I's relationship. And she read the book, and she says, how do you have a smile in life after going through this stuff? I said, girl, it's healing. I can't tell you nothing else, because healing is what's done it. And in that moment, I knew my healing was working. I knew that I could leave that situation and not be worsened, traumatized by the situation. I had processed that potentially traumatic event in real life and come out of it fine. I left the funeral and the emotions were still there, because remember, I get to choose how to handle and how long. And I said to my daughter-in-law before we got in the car, we had to leave from there and go to the cemetery to do the final interment of her, put him in the box thing. And I said, I need a moment. And I set off walking. Sometimes you got to walk those emotions out. I had done the processing. I knew it wasn't traumatizing, but I was still feeling disgusted with this whole situation. And there were some other things that went down in the middle of the funeral. There were some other things that went down. One of my childhood abusers, they had decided was going to be the pallbearer. That was a whole other thing where I had to go do the whole trauma resolution process all over again. You say, who fits to carry her body out of here at this box? You say, who? An abuser that my mama knew about? But see, my mom kept secrets. So even her best friend didn't know, and it made me feel sorry for my mother. Your best friend has been somebody you haven't been honest with. My mother's life is still living even afterwards, so that you didn't protect me then, and you're not even protecting me in death. But I had dealt with that, and so all I had left was just being agitated and disgusted. And so I said, let me take a walk. And I set out walking while they were going to the car. Give me a moment. Let me get myself together, because I don't want to keep this. I don't want to hold on to it. I want to hold on to garbage. I want to hold it the least amount possible, but I got to be honest. So I got to process through it. And I began walking. I got 3.5 blocks up, and then I started chuckling to myself. I said, girl, all you needed was go. You done 3.5 blocks. And I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm done being angry. That's all the energy I want to put into life on this situation and these emotions. I'm done. I don't want to be agitated anymore. It is what it is. And I knew that I was not traumatized by this. I was done. And so then I laughed because I said, girl, if you knew it was only going to take 3.5 blocks of walking, you should have walked 2 blocks and turned around. You'd have been back. Now you got to walk back 3.5 blocks back the other way. And so I walked back with this chuckle in my spirit. But in my core, I knew I was good. Others around me weren't sure. My children were like, Mom, are you okay? Mom, are you okay? Good. I put my music in. I have a PlayStation that I call my frequency music. My frequency music is Trap House Jazz. Masego, FKJ, Tom Mish. I put my earphones on. I turned my Trap House Jazz on. And I knew I was good. I was good. I was leaving this situation knowing that my healing wasn't just working in the past. It was working in real time. Those are situations that I've seen people. The funeral go bad. You got issues and somebody don't let you stay long enough at the coffin or whatever. And you got another generation of trauma that you layer on from that one incident. If I hadn't been invested in my healing before the crisis came, I wouldn't have been prepared. And so for me, these principles are principles that play over and over and over again in some of the solution building that I do for how we fix community. If you understand how the paradigm concepts work, and if you understand how healing not only works, but also gets unwoven, and you start putting it in life. And when I came out of that, for me, there was a set of tests in life. Sometimes you get situations that feel like tests. This was one of those tests where you say, I might be grown up now. I came out of that and some of the dysfunction in my family after the funeral was getting ready to start. And I said to my uncle, I said, let me just have a real calm conversation with you, but let me explain to you my values. That behavior that you are exhibiting is very similar to the behavior that I disconnected from my mama based on. Because it came to a time where I told her I'm going to eventually have to disconnect if you don't do anything differently. Because it's too toxic for me. It takes me too much work to interact with you and then have to go heal a whole nother suitcase full of trauma that comes from my interaction. And the time came where I did. I couldn't even say the words. I had to just hang the phone up. Couldn't do it. Took me to a place where you talk about being triggered. I understood like never before that sense of triggering. You can't even get to a place of logical thought in your mind. It was so intense. The rage was so strong. But I said to him, if I can disconnect from my mama, who I love, I'm like my mama in some ways, love my mama. But if I can disconnect with her for my mental health, baby, you ain't nothing. You, everything else is easy. Everything. I will cut it off. Toxic, up, cut. I'll check first. Is this my assignment? Nope, not my assignment. Cut it off. And I said to him, don't think that I did this healing work to go backwards. That behavior, here's your warning. If you want to interact with me, because I don't want to change other people, but if you want to interact with me, that is unacceptable and that's non-negotiable. And I have cut my mama off from communication with me. You would be nothing. Be easy. Be easy. You have to go through it though, because it's theoretical until life puts the situation. Can you actually live it? And that was one of the experiences in my life where I said, yeah, Jesse Collins is onto some stuff. Jesse Collins is onto some stuff because I can attribute it to simply, Kenny Pops, thanks for dropping in. I can attribute it to my healing journey. And even if my mother didn't accept what I was bringing to her, my conscience was clear where I had done the most loving thing I could to her, by her, and for her. And part of this has been, what if we as people in community began to live from a more healed perspective? Can we then sit down and have the conversations we need to have that help us find the solutions or help us resolve the issues of trauma? As blacks, there has never been a collective healing process that we've gone through that heals some of the layers, the 400 years of layers that many of us live into. You're welcome, Kenny Pops. Thank you for dropping in. I think these are on repeat feed, so if there's something that you missed, I think you can go back and re-look at the conversations. Or I think maybe I can download them to my YouTube channel. I'm not really sure. I'm still learning TikTok, so I'll figure it out as I go. But what if we had the tools? Tools might not look like what you've been used to, but what if the tools began to work? And so when we go back to this idea of paradigms that Joel talks about and understanding how they move, what if those unsolvable problems right now of healing really had solutions? Would it change our conversation? I challenge that it does. I challenge that it can. I challenge that if we're going to find solutions, we have to find the solutions for healing. We have to. We have to. Because no matter what we create, if we create something new and we take the same garbage value systems, the same defensive behaviors, the same ego stuff into it, we're going to get the same exact thing. And I don't care who's in charge. Put black folks in charge, put white folks in charge, put the colonists in charge. I don't care who you put in charge. If we take the same faulty garbage into the next system, we're going to get the same results. That's logical to me. I'll stand on that. I'll argue that down. We get the same dysfunction just later on down the road. So I propose that we consider these models. We consider understanding the tools that Joel Barker gives that overlay into understanding social paradigm changes, understanding the dynamics of change, understanding strategically how you make change happen, because he gives a strategy on who you go find, who you work with first, who you help second, who you help third. And I suggest we search for those paradigm shifters. Jesse Collins, Nikola Tesla. There's a whole bunch of them within the past 100 years that can give us some insights. But the one that's non-negotiable is healing. If we don't find a solution for trauma, I don't think we have the opportunity to be able to make the kinds of fixes this time around that society really is calling for. If we look, he is one of those things that's crying out for healing. And so what if we started supporting that paradigm shifter, Jesse Collins, that says, I think I can heal trauma? What would that change our conversations? I suggest that it does. And then once we start doing that, then let's have talks about the environment, the housing, roof over the head, food on the table. How do we help others learn how to have these processing skills? How do we get people off the ledge? How do we have economic sustainability and cooperative economics in our community? Then let's have those conversations from our healed perspective. Kenny Pops, thanks for joining in.
Thank
Something
you
you
for having me.
join. I like having conversation. This TikTok thing is kind of like a monologue.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd love to get some involvement. Talk to
Yeah,
me about it.
you know how when you hear good stuff, you know how it is. Well, I grew up in the church, so it make you want to shout. You know what I'm saying? So I've been
Get
over
your
here all
tambourine,
morning,
girl.
just
Get your
I'm over here
tambourine.
shouting like the goddess is definitely speaking the facts today. You
Right,
know,
right,
like really,
right.
really, really, when you are broken, everything you say is going to come from a place of brokenness. Everything you do is going to come from a place of brokenness. So healing is very important if you want to be productive. You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing I had to learn. Like you, when you were speaking about your mother's homegoing services, you know, it's power there. That's the power.
Definitely.
Like that 2 minute walk. You know, if I had known all it was gonna take was 2 minutes, I would have invested that 2 minutes a long time ago. But
Right.
divine timing, you understand what I'm saying? Like it happens when it has to happen, you know?
Yeah.
So you gotta be I had to go through healing from those same childhood traumas. I had to go through that same healing. And it, you know, is like you wonder why.
Right.
Why is it so important that you hide this information? Why is it so important that you cover it, sweep it under the rug, pretend like it doesn't exist? Why?
Ego, ego, ego.
Why? You
Every bit
understand
of
what I'm
it.
saying? Like what are you trying to protect when
No,
you
no,
say
let me
you're
tell you.
going to allow, you know what I'm saying, things that should be exposed to be hidden? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make
No, no.
sense to me,
Let
you
me give
know?
you the analogy. Let me give you the analogy and see if it makes sense to you in an instant. Do you have anybody in your family that's dealt with addiction?
Yes.
Okay. I had an uncle all growing up, the H word. That was his thing. That was his thing. He's sober now. He's living a life. He's transformed out of that. When they're in the midst of using their drug of choice, trying to have a logical conversation, whether it's the H, whether it's the C, whether it's the whatever, whatever, and the whatever. If you try to have a logical conversation with the person in the midst of their addiction while they're using their drug of choice, how does that work out? Does that ever seem like a good thing to do?
Yeah,
Does it ever
you're
seem
right.
like a productive thing to
You're
do?
right. You're right.
Here's the analogy. Here's what I realized. And I'll stand on this one too. I'll fight this one down too. Trauma is an addiction. Ego feeding behavior is the drug of choice.
When I say I will stand 10 toes down with you on that
Absolutely.
statement, you understand what
Any
I'm saying? I
anytime.
told,
If you see somebody
oh my
operating in
goodness.
their ego, fear, guilt, any response you see that's ego, the only thing you have to know is that is a drug of choice being used in this moment. If you only understand that, then sometimes we understand that our behavior don't make no sense. If you see someone and you see ego feeding behavior, they blowing up, they going into defense mode, because sometimes it's subtle. I'm defending myself. No, no, any ego defense, because the need to defend yourself is a responsive behavior. Anything that's ego is a drug of choice. And I can do one of two things. I can make that addiction situation worse or better right now. That's it. That's the only choice you got. If
I
you
mean,
only know that,
mm,
and then you say, if I respond with my ego, what am I doing? I'm showing my addiction.
yep, you're growing it.
I'm showing my
You're
addiction.
growing it. You're
And
showing that you're not healed as well. You know, you're
what
showing
am I
that trauma
doing?
still exists there too, you know? And that's why I tell people all the time the best response, if you are truly healed, is no response at all.
No, you say, thank you. So when
Yeah,
my mother says, your healing's not doing any work for you, I can say, in my heart, my conscience is clear. I have
yeah,
come with my defenses down in love. I say, thank you. Thank you.
that's
Because guess
it.
what? My values say you are entitled to your opinion.
You
That's what my values
entitled.
say.
That your only thing you entitled to on this earth is your opinion. That's the only
If
thing you
I,
entitled to on this earth is your opinion. And your opinion has no effect on my reality because it's your opinion. You know, like what you think about me, how you feel about me, it should not change the way I think or feel about myself. But what you just said about trauma being an addiction.
and we layer on the drugs of choice. We layer them on. Because
Yeah. But
we
you
add
don't, so
hair,
many, the
we add
drug
face,
is just to expose
costumes,
the trauma
masks.
though. You know, you go and do this drug because you know that once you do it, then it's going to take you back to that place of trauma and then you can feel sorry for yourself all over again, or you can have somebody feeling sorry for you all over again. It's so true.
And when do
It's
we
so
tell
so
people?
true.
When do we see the biggest
Mm-mm-mm.
transformation in someone who has an addiction? When do we see the transformation? When they get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
When
Nothing
you
you
have to be
can do,
tired.
nothing you can do is going to
That's
make
true.
them be a good candidate for transformation until they get
Yep.
sick and tired. Now,
That's it.
let's take if trauma is an addiction and we see people behaving badly, what should we do?
Yep.
Go heal ourselves, because
That's it.
nothing we're going to do is
That's
going to
it.
help them until now what we can do is heal ourselves so that we are not a part of the damage
Thank
that's being
you.
caused by interact, because if they interact with you and you go off ham on them, guess what, they worse.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
Yeah. And you
You
became a
see
part
there's
of that
nothing wrong
trauma
with
too.
her,
You became a part of the trauma too.
but you make it.
Now you are connected to the trauma, you know?
You're complaining about somebody's dysfunction and then you make their dysfunction worse. Is
Yeah.
that logical? Come
Mm,
on,
mm,
like
mm.
really.
Mm,
If
mm,
I got
mm.
an issue with the behavior of black men and I start doing things that actually make them worse, but I'm complaining because they bad,
Is that making sense?
Say it,
No.
goddess. Speak
I'm
the
making them
facts.
worse.
Say,
And so
speak the
what
facts.
we do is, and I see this and it makes me sad because in our TikTok space, I've only been here a few weeks. What I see is we do exactly if I you give your opinion and guess what I do? I attack you for having an opinion.
For even
Wait a minute.
having one.
If my value system says that we're entitled to that, then by my very interaction with you, I have just traumatized myself
Yes.
and I
Yep.
have added trauma to you. We
Yep.
are both worse, which means we are both less capable of being able to help us get to solutions. We're going in the
Thank
wrong
you.
direction. Going
Thank
in the
you.
wrong direction.
And
Wrong
that's
direction.
why I said when we speak from brokenness, a lot of the conversations that's being had on these platforms are coming from a place of brokenness because of the simple fact that opinions are not being respected. You can
Yeah.
tell how much brokenness exists when a person's mere opinion is not respected. Why would I not respect your opinion? That's your train of thought. Like that has
You
nothing
have
to
the
do with
right.
me.
You
So
have the
when
right
we
to
when
have an
we get
opinion.
on here and I say something and you yelling at me for how I feel and you say something and I'm yelling at you for how you feel, we just continue in trauma. We shouldn't even be speaking right now.
Now
We
let's
shouldn't
put the
even be
drug away.
speaking.
Let's say that we're not operating in our drug of choice, that ego. If we come out of that state of being on that drug of choice,
Yeah.
we could probably sit down and logically say, do you think it's okay to yell at folks trying to get you? Do you think that's an effective way? Logically,
Logically.
we can have, but when you're using your drugs
Yeah.
of choice,
Yeah.
and so when we see people, when I see people, and I understand trauma better now,
Hmm.
and I say they're using that because they got issues, and I say they're doing their best. What I see right now is their best.
That's it.
They're under the influence of it,
That's
and
it.
in my mind, when I if it gets intense, I have to go in my mind, assume it's something else, replace
Hmm.
that C word, replace that H
Yeah.
word, and
Yeah.
assume that's what they're using right now
Yeah.
because it does. Because if we get into, well, my drug is better than your drug, mine is worse
Yeah.
than yours, mine is better,
Yeah.
mine is not as bad as yours. Just because I use my ego in this way, it makes it
Yeah.
better. And we have to stop doing that if
Yeah.
we really want to get to solutions,
And that's
and we do it in face of my sin is worse than your sin. Your sin is worse than my sin, because that's
Mhm.
usually what we say. Girl, your sin is worse because I can see your sin.
Yeah.
That's not as bad as my sin. That's uncut. You don't know when I'm using my drug of
Yep.
choice. I don't
Yep.
let you see when I'm using mine. It may be after hours behind closed doors. And so you don't
Yeah.
see the way I know the destructive ways in my life, sex, people,
Yeah. Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
feeding my ego. I'm feeding my ego. I'm feeding my
Yeah.
ego. That's survival. That's real. It's survival.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
survival. It's survival.
It's
That's how we
survival.
survive.
Yeah.
But when you know better, you got to learn how to do better, because just
And
knowing
that's
better ain't enough. It's not enough. That's our mother's generation. Know better, do better. That's behavior modification.
yeah.
Grandmother talked about, I know why the cage bird sings. That's
Yeah.
old paradigm.
Yeah.
New
Yeah.
paradigm says I am a bird and I
Yeah.
don't have a cage. I don't
Yeah.
have a cage.
Yeah. I ain't got
you
it.
know
Yeah. I sing because
so
I'm free out the cage. You not because I'm free in the cage. You
and then all
not
you got to
no.
do is reach outside the
No.
cage and open the
Yeah.
door.
Yeah.
You
Open
are
the
the one
door. You know what
that
I'm
opens
saying?
it. And so this
And
is an
you know what's funny is
opportunity.
that I had birds, and I'm big on data analysis. Like it seemed like everything I'm watching, I'm doing this data analysis on how something works or why it works that way. And so many times my birds would get out the cage, and I'm like, how y'all get out the cage?
Mm-hmm.
So one day I just sat from another room because when I was in the room, they would never get out of the cage. So one day I
Mm-hmm.
sat from another room where I was out of their eyesight, and I saw the bird open the cage.
Mm-hmm.
So why would a cage bird sing? Why wouldn't you just open the cage? You understand what I'm saying? But sometimes we get so trapped in these thoughts that we feel like it ain't no way out. So we sit there and we tolerate these behaviors and we tolerate these words and we say what some people are not allowed to do, but then in our own home, we allow those behaviors to take place. And that's trauma.
Yeah.
That's trauma. The fact that you feel like these people can't treat you or talk to you this kind of way, but the people in your very home are allowed to do so for any reason is trauma. You understand what I'm saying? So how can
Absolutely.
how can I allow you to mistreat me, but when I go out into the world, nobody can disrespect me and nobody can talk. You got to practice that across the board. If it can't happen here, it can't happen there either. And that's where healing really kicks in at, you know?
You talk about, I like to use principles that are universal because you see the patterns over and over again. To me, that resonates truth for me. You know, when I'm looking for truth, let it be something that's a pattern that I see over and over in society. I'm a farmer. I just
Thank
retired
you.
in May as a farmer. I retired. I raise birds. Quail was my main livestock. Chickens, I've raised chickens. I've raised other things too. I was the llama's mama for a while and a whole bunch of other little adventures that life has given me. Um, but what I realize, here's the principle. Here's the universal principle. Chickens, if they get out, can go survive in the wild without me. They can survive. Everything they already need as far as food and water, they have the capacity to go find it for themselves. When I put them in a cage, they are beholding to me for the very existence that's right outside that cage for them to get to. How do I know? Let one of them chickens get out. That chicken will thrive for a long time. It'll be out there, and if it's a hen and there's a rooster somewhere nearby, eventually that chicken will come out the woods with a couple little chicks behind it. Even though I have them in confinement, their resources are already provided outside of that box for them. The only
Yes.
difference with them is they can't get themselves out of a box. We can. Now, how
Yep.
do we do that in real life? I go to this job and think that that job is supplying my needs. That job is the source of my stability. And COVID and economics is showing people that's a lie. That's a lie. Because tomorrow, if they don't need you, you be gone and your whole world be upshaken. And so part of that is we as individuals, the humanity of who we are is that we have the opportunity to do exactly what you did. How do we learn how to get outside of the room of the midst of that ego stuff? Because when you went out and had a different perspective, you could see the problem. I challenge that this model gives us a way to teach people how to step out of that room into a perspective that helps them find the damage, just like I did. And while I'm thinking about that, I pulled up that article. So I want to share this with you because I think it gives an example of this in words. I use my words. And this is the unsolicited eulogy. You can find it on medium.com
Okay.
under Larana. My name is Larahna, or you can go to No Wasted Time and you can find contact information and I'll tell you where to find it. But I'm going to read it.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so this is about my mother's story. This is the culmination. I thought I just pull it up instead of sending people in case they may not be able to get there. Throughout the process of grieving for first my grandmother and soon thereafter my mother, one of the songs I played over and over was Denise Williams and some other singer singing Black Butterfly. The one phrase that stuck out to me was, tell your sons and daughters what the struggle brings. Freedom is what the struggle brings. I am part of a family like many others, and we got issues. In a recent conversation with one of my family members, the conversation went something like this. My family member says, but I never thought our family would be like this, like those families, and me, like which families? And him, like those families on TV. Me, like reality TV. Yeah, we them. Yep, they are us. So, and so is usually how you start a story that's really in the middle of a much bigger episode, but you've got to start somewhere, and so is usually the start. So I prepared words to speak at my mother's funeral, but I was not given the opportunity to speak at her funeral. The words are worth sharing as a reminder, more to me than anyone else, of what my struggle has brought for me, the freedom to choose love. If I were standing at my mother's funeral in California, overlooking her closed casket and the beautiful flowers draped over its cover, I would say, when I received the call of my mother's death, it was the closing of an era in my life of being parented by the mother and father that I was given. Not the orphan in a traditional sense, but the closing of that generation in my human experience. What's left? As in death, the impact lingers. My mother, as a donor, will live on in other ways in the physical. The lessons learned and gleaned will live on and also in me. We hear about the story of the dash, the space we occupy between birth and death. But more pronounced for me are the final lessons left me by both parents. They are more pronounced as they now sit as bookends to my life of being parented. I want to take a moment to share a highlight of what that means to me, as they are lessons on how to live. The parting lessons from my father were hard, but often felt very good. He taught me: one, if I wake up, it's on purpose. Figure out why. Two, live life fully today, in real time, literally. Three, be at peace with God. Four, do my part to be at peace with everyone, with the reminder you can't choose for them to be at peace with me, but still do my part to be at peace. Five, if I wake up tomorrow, do it again. Six, if I don't wake up tomorrow, I will have completed my vision with no regrets. Powerful lessons that I got to learn in the midst of fabulous plane rides and motorcycle rides. My father completed his assignment as my father, and then he was out. I needed those lessons to go through the next chapter, 14 years up to my mother's death. My mother also left me with a parting lesson to enter into my next chapter. This lesson made my father's lessons much harder to live. My mother and I had a strained relationship. That's the nice way of saying in public what is a funeral taboo of: my mother was not perfect, and neither am I, and our relationship was painful more often than pleasurable. But those relationships that we all have sometimes in our lives are equally important and just as valuable. My mother helped me to make sure that I had learned a recent lesson in love and freedom. What lesson, you may wonder? Simply put, real freedom. And freedom that I strive to achieve is the freedom to love, to choose to love. Not just the love we give when it feels good, but the love without defenses up to those who have hurt us and who will likely hurt us again. In the recent passing of my grandmother, I was here in California after it being a long time, years since I had been here. I had the opportunity to come back and see my mother with my defenses up, prepared to protect myself, and then I was faced with a choice. I could choose to use all the tools in the arsenal toolbox of my ego, tools over the years living in a traumatizing world that I had sharpened. Instead, against my ego's better judgment, I came, having decided that those were tools I didn't want to transport here from the life I have created in South Carolina. I would not be that kind of bag lady on that trip. And instead, I decided to try freedom. It was much heavier than the other tools in my toolbox. I believe it, but can I live it? Especially when it's hard. Knowing our encounter might hurt, can I come in love without judgment or defenses? My last private encounter face to face was my test. Can I live it? It's not about judgment, Mom. It's about freedom. Freedom to love. I had a conversation 2 days later with a dear friend who said, be grateful. Be grateful you could see your mother, and you know you chose love when you could have chosen otherwise. That's the freedom you were talking about. He said, you never know if it will be your last opportunity. A week after that conversation with my mother, she was dead. The fact was that was in fact the last opportunity, and for that I am grateful. Her last job as my mother was to be the proctor for my last parenting exam. It was the comprehensive exam for my life's master class. Can you put these lessons together and live them? I woke up that day. Check. It was on purpose. Check. Figure out why. To have a heart talk with my mom. Check. Do what you can to be at peace with your mom. Check. Do it in love with defenses down. Check. My mother had to be exactly who she was to fulfill her role as my mother. When I set aside the knowledge of good and evil, right or wrong, she simply was. She was my mother. She was Sable Dean Howard Hughes, and she played her role to the end. God and the universe gave me these parents and these lessons for the role I play in the world and into this next chapter. What was her role in your life? Our ultimate freedom and hopefully your quest of your spiritual and healing journey is to mature and heal so that no matter how others interact with us, we choose love. For people of faith, especially for the Christian tradition my mother embraced, you are offered the gift of freedom and liberty. Hear me today. That freedom includes the freedom to choose love. But they may hurt me. Yes, but I get to choose who I am. And I choose love. I choose light. Through my test, I can now credit my mother with having taught me that true freedom is the freedom to love. I hope she tasted that freedom even in her final days. If she didn't, I'm sure that after April 8th, 2021, her passing, whether it happened in that instant or if it is the next thing she will know according to her faith beliefs, she too now has complete freedom. Thank you for your patience and for allowing me to share. I wrote this in memorial of my mother, Sable Dean Howard Hughes, who was born on May 9th, 1945, and died on April 8th, 2021. That was a gift that my mother gave me. It was the practice. It was the test, the most intense test I can think of. But it was the test that left me with the ability to say, my healing's working for me. The freedom to be able to choose. I'm going to choose to be a loving person because I understand that no one can damage my spirit. They can hurt my feelings. They can create things that are traumatizing, but when I know that I've got the capacity to heal, even from what may come, I can go out in the world with my defenses down and choose to be the kind of person that really is the reflection in the mirror. And it's a loving person. It's a kind and compassionate person. And it's a person who loves others just as well as she's learning to love herself. Life has to give you some tests sometimes before you know it for real. In theory, yep, I was healed, but could I go? And it was catching myself and saying, I could go with my defenses up. But wait a minute, didn't you heal so you ain't got to? You
Yes,
ain't got to go with that pettiness that's going to
yes.
injure somebody else and
And
go and then you got injury. And
I
so it's
just,
learning to live it. Go
yes.
ahead.
I was gonna say I just made the statement that yesterday that life gives you the test first, and then you learn the lesson. When we go through school, we learn the lesson, and then we are tested on what we learned to see if we retained the information that was given to us. But when we go through life, we test it, and then you can sit back and you go through that test, and you be like, "Now, what was this teaching me?" And you pick up the lesson of the test. You know. It's so very true, and the piece you wrote is so very powerful. We got to heal from those traumas. When we speak about two-parent households, I had a man tell me that children raised by a single-parent household grow up to be this and grow up to be that and grow up to be this, and they ain't. And I'm like, you know what? I was raised in a two-parent household that I had to heal from. I had to literally heal
I don't
from the
see it all
core.
as
Like,
bad because
I in
sometimes
a
we do
two
our
parent
best.
home, I had to heal all the way to the core. You
Yeah,
understand what I'm saying?
yeah,
Because so many things were swept under the rug or
that's right.
avoided being talked about or not, you know what I'm saying, brought to
What
the
happens
light.
in this
And
house stays in this
yeah,
house.
Yeah,
Hmm.
what
I
that's
lived it.
it. You better not tell nobody my business, and you better not, you know what I'm saying? So that's it. So
And you
when you
better
can
not
get to
get
a
healed and
place,
talk about it. You better not
when
do
you
no
can
healing and go
get
talk
to
about it.
a place and say my healing is working for me,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Those words that you speak in are my healing, my like personal healing is
Yeah.
working for me. I don't expect it to work for you. You can look at me and still see me as an unhealed individual, and that don't bother me at one single bit.
That's because
How
your
you see
ego
it,
is healing. Your
that's
ego
it.
is healing. When
Yeah,
you begin to know who you are, the true you, when you
yeah.
stop telling lies to yourself and can accept
Mhm.
that, that's
Mhm.
powerful. Because then
Mhm.
others can't influence you. Ignite, you're welcome. When you can't, when someone can't use my past, because that's what my family would do. Your past. Why is still an issue? Why are you still talking about this? Why are you still? Because every time I come into these circles, this is the same, stuff. I
Yeah.
hear, you know. Why you got to deal? Why you got to talk? Let's just not talk about it. No, no, no. I need to talk about it because that's the dysfunction of not talking about it, not
That's
dealing
it.
with it. I
That's
don't
it.
want that
Why
anymore.
that's
I've
it.
seen
We
that
were
become
raised, yeah,
poison.
you seen and not heard, you know? So when you come from a place of being seen and not heard and you finally get the opportunity to speak, yeah, I got some things to say. I
And that
saw a lot of
bitterness.
things that I had to sweep under the rug. It was a lot of things that I had to ignore and not talk about. But now that I'm given the opportunity, like you said, when you take the time to write the words down on the napkin and you tuck them away to make sure they don't get damaged, you understand what I'm saying? But the words that we speak are the words that we need to hear first. Every time we speak to self first, you know? So the message sometimes is just for us. It's
And
just for
that's
us, but we
that's what
even
we should
taught
give it.
that. Like when you talk to yourself, you delusional or you crazy. No, it's good to talk to yourself. That's how healing takes place. You got to be honest with yourself. Like you said, stop lying.
Yeah.
Quit creating these false narratives that things are fine and things are, and be honest that things are not how they're supposed to be.
The two projects I finished up in 2022 were the two books that are one. I think I've got them on several of my posts, but the first book was about what my healing journey looks like. It's a real honest, raw. It's got a trigger warning in the beginning, but it takes someone through, like literally, like what's the process? Like what does it really look like? It's messy, but it's honest. And if you go through the process, you see the progression. But it's called Uncovered, and the subtitle is having a healing conversation with myself. And then the second project that I finished just before the end of the year is a journal that talks about how to have healing conversations. It's a journal that gives you the writing prompts that takes you through this healing process that Jesse Collins claimed can heal trauma. In my own life, I'm passionate about it because this is one of those, has it worked for you? And I say, woo woo. I knew the hot mess. And
Yes.
I go through one of the healing cycles where I tell you the hot mess, some of the SA parts of my life that any one of the incidents could have landed me on a corner or on a pole somewhere doing things that were so destructive to myself. I understand where I could have been,
Yeah.
where I should be if all of the statistics are right, because I'm a product of all of those
That's
statistics.
it.
I,
That's
I was
it.
pregnant at 13 years old. I got a son that was born at 14. I'm surprised that he's as much of a productive citizen as he is. He's gone through the military. He's a law
Yes.
enforcement officer. He's a dad. He's a father. He's a husband.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
say, woo woo, I know you really made out good because I could have been a hot mess. 14 years
Yeah.
old. I'm
Yeah.
talking back in the 90s, 14 years.
Yes.
You were just messed up and you didn't have supports. Like there was still a stigma. Like when my church found out, I had to go get rebaptized because I was pregnant, which is the foolishness that we do sometimes to make it
Yeah.
seem like it was okay for me to even be seen because it was the scarlet, the A on your chest that you had. Like that was dysfunctional,
Yeah.
dysfunctional.
This very
Nobody asked,
dysfunctional.
why is a 13-year-old girl pregnant? Like we didn't
Yeah.
need there's something wrong with her, something wrong that she pregnant at 13 years old. Like, come on.
Yeah,
But we
but
just, you're right.
the water ain't gonna get it out, you know.
We just go,
And my grandmother used to make the statement in reference to baptism that was so funny to me. But she would say, if you go down a wet devil, if you go down a dry devil, you gonna come up a wet devil. the water ain't go the water ain't gonna do nothing to you, you know.
I
If you
remember
don't
that
change your
process.
mind, if you don't change your mind, that water don't have no power. And once you change your mind, that you don't need the water. You know what I'm saying?
You
Like
do
the
it dunk,
water
you do it
is
in
not, you
Jesus'
don't got to
name,
do
and it's
it.
better.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's like, okay, do we at what point do we get honest and say, that ain't working, y'all. That ain't working.
You better
Um
not say it.
some of
You
the
better not
abusers
say
up
it.
in the
You
church
better
that
not
caused
say
some of the
it.
trauma. Oh, I say it. I say it. That's why we was that's why we was at odds. But in this book, I talk about it. I say because if I can't be honest, then what happens? If I'm doing healing work and I'm not doing it honestly, the fake it till you make it, then
Yes.
it's a game that's actually traumatizing me.
If
And
you
so I have a
doing
false
healing
sense
work,
of security.
if you're doing healing work and you're not doing it honestly, you're not doing healing work. You
No,
just
no, you're causing
continue in that
damage.
trauma. Yeah, you
That's
just
right. That's
continue in
right.
that trauma.
That's
You
right.
are not doing, just quit. And
Right.
that's what I say. We go through so many notions to pretend. All the time you spend pretending, you might as well just do it. Like, what is the purpose? You putting more energy into faking than you
Yeah.
would have to put into if you just went through and actually did the work, you know?
Let's take it to community though, because I think even that some of this healing has to be done so we can have honest conversations. When I hear some of the conversations that men and women get into, especially in the Black community, we talk about the toxic women. If we're being honest, I'm able to then say, that was my mama they talking about. My
That's it.
mama was poisoned, and all I knew about my daddy, and she made sure that he stayed far enough away intentionally. I saw that as a child, that
Yeah.
bitterness that was like
Yep.
poison that my brother got. I've always been different. And so he and I, into adulthood, had a relationship because he's like me. But I understood that my mother was angry at him and every bit of him that she saw in me. That poison was directed there.
Yeah.
Like, if we're honest, then we have to be able to say that they did not have the skills then to
That's it.
learn how to work their relations out.
Yep.
Even when you agree to part companies, that you agree to do what's in the best interest of those children, even
Mm-hmm.
if you have to put your, like, I understand, like, that's the reality. And I know there's women out there doing the same thing, but it's a both and. If
Yeah.
I'm interacting with you, we are both part of the problem in society. And if we learn that, if we do enough healing that we can then live it, then what happens when we sit down at those tables and let's talk about racism, transphobia, xenophobia, all the other phobias that we just make up, colorism, classism, ageism, they're all the
Yeah.
product of the same exact thing. My
Trauma.
ego needs to be
Yep.
feed.
Yep.
I will feed my ego even at the point of destruction to me and you. If I will
Yep.
destroy me, you think I won't destroy you too? Come
Say
on.
it.
If
Say
I'll
it.
destroy me, you taking you out ain't nothing. I will compromise you in any way that my ego needs to be fed. Because I'll do it to myself. I am taking things into my system, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, that are poison. If I will do that to myself, you think that I won't do it to you? That's illogical.
Say it.
So if
Say
we
it.
can begin to heal, then I think we can begin to have, I hope and I believe that we can then begin to have constructive conversations. Because when you say, Lorana, you showing out over there, if I'm able to be honest, I'll say, Kenny Pops, you know you right, girl. Let me
Yeah,
let
let
me
me
go get me
step
a nap
back.
and a snack
Let
and
me
get
step
myself
back,
together. I'm having a
Instead of
moment
feeling,
because I got
but a hurt
issues.
dog is gonna cry. You understand? A wounded dog is gonna cry. You know what I'm saying? So if I say something to you and you know it to be factual, yeah, you gonna cry. You
And so
gonna
the
cry.
implications of this for me have been, this tool alone has not only provided a healing framework, but a critical thinking framework. It has provided a tool for being able to help people learn how to increase their emotional intelligence, which is communicating what's going on with you so I don't have to read your mind kind of stuff. And it has given a framework for doing conflict resolution.
Yes.
Part of deciding to be on this platform was I feel like I have a voice to say. I have something to say that's relevant to the conversation. That if people don't understand about paradigm shifters and they don't
Yeah.
understand that's who you support. If they don't understand that there's been some shifters that's gone three decades before me that says,
Yeah.
I think I can start healing it. And then for someone to work with it to say, hold on, if we use that, we not only heal trauma, we give people increased emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
we have conflict resolution framework,
Mm-hmm.
we have all of these other implications. And from there, we then have the capacity to make decisions for change that do
Yeah.
just like you and your birds. Let's get outside of this box. Let's understand that this paradigm will die. Let's stop trying to invest in propping it up. Let's put behavior modification in place to keep things from going rogue. But at the same time, let's go build a new system. Let's go build a
Yes.
new way. And
Or
so
based
I
on new
decided,
thoughts and new
you
ideas and
thought
new
got to go into that other
behaviors.
room.
Yes.
Got to go in the other
Yes.
room now and look.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and even though your perspective from that room you felt was good enough, it's not until you leave that paradigm that you understand. And that's what the model says. You got to get outside of that paradigm. Get out the box.
Mm-hmm.
Throw the box away.
Mm-hmm.
Throw the box.
Mm-hmm.
Start new. Start new. Start
And
new. Start new.
I read a book that was very powerful. I'm gonna call it a paradigm shifter, right? The Four Agreements
That's a
by
good one.
Don Manuel.
It's
It
a good
was
one.
it was an eye opener for me. You know what I'm saying? When you realize that you were born into somebody else's dream and somebody else's chaos and somebody else's confusion
Hmm.
and somebody
Hmm.
else's drama and trauma and damage, and you were
Yeah.
never even given a good head start. Like you just came in carrying other people problems before
Yeah.
you were even taught how to carry problems or solve them, and then was never taught, had to learn on your own how to do this. So to
Yeah.
me, that book right there too was very, because it broke it down in the simplest terms.
Yeah.
Be
I have a
impeccable,
short list.
be impeccable with your words and always do your best and don't overthink it. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
those things right there, when you just make it a practice, it
Yep. I think
frees
there's
you from
lots of
being a
things.
bird in the box. Like I don't have to
Yeah.
be the bird in the box.
That's right. I think there's a short list of books that I have that I use in some of my teaching. I love pop culture. I love stories. There's music. Erica Badu sings
Yes,
Bag Lady.
yes,
Go listen to it.
yes,
Pink and the Bangers sings a song called Walmart.
yes,
Uh, I Am Light. India Ari sings a song about being light and
yes,
about choosing.
yes,
Slow down, sister. Slow down. You're moving too
yes,
fast. You're causing
yep,
damage. Slow it
yeah,
down.
yeah,
Think about what's important. But there's that movie called Little. It's a good one, but it talks about how trauma happens. There's another
yeah.
movie called Seahorse. It talks about what happens when you let people just run till they're done. Wait till they get to the sick and tired of being sick and tired point, like
Thank
Fannie Hoo
you.
said. See, there's if you like stories, Richard Bach has wonderful stories. There's one called Illusions, but the Jonathan Livingston Seagull,
Okay.
excellent book for someone that's working. But there's also Untethered Soul. I recommend people read paradigms, understand how the paradigms shift, find out if
Yeah.
you are a shifter, a pioneer, or a settler in the because
Yes.
there are different things in different areas of your life. But if you understand that, you understand why you conflicting with the settler with a settler. They
Say
move at a
it.
different pace, not wrong, just
Yep.
different. If you
Just
understand those
different.
differences, and
Yes.
so there's a short list of books. Let me see, is there any others that's critical? Those are ones. Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Untethered Soul. I'm looking over at my books. Paradigms, definitely the social tech, trauma resolution work. I have like the journal that's available now that can serve as a healing journal for people, but I also Uncovered is also on Amazon. That is a deep look into my one of the healing circles that I've taken
Okay.
myself through.
Okay. Okay.
So if you have the journal and you understand the process for this healing modality, you can see from the start to the end the resolution process of how
Yes.
he helps you unweave the
Yep.
damage out of your life and like magic, the symptoms. So instead of us fighting the fires, if we get to the core. And so I've had to really think, how am I going to use this platform? And I thought one of the things that I can offer is we've got options for healing. Let's stop
Yes.
that conversation about if we could just heal people. Nope, I know how. If you are going
Mm-hmm.
to be doing lives, if you have a platform, I will come on. It's a process that I can teach. I can teach and give them I can teach it in about 45 minutes, but I can
Yeah.
take someone through the process with examples from their real life, which gives
Yep.
them the experience of it in 2 hours. If you're going to have a platform, or if you have a platform and you need a conflict resolution means for being able to deal with dialogue, there's one or two people I've seen on here that do do it well. Like he
Yeah.
understands this principle without even knowing it. And I've had the
Yep.
conversation with him to say the way that you hold your lives, the way that you force people to have conversations
Yep.
is how this man undoes healing. If this
Yes.
guy understood that, so if people want to be able to have a way to have a framework for how we're going to process it so that these conversations don't become damaging, I've said I'm going to be available in this space. I'm going to
Yeah.
use this platform to help us get to the solutions, to help those who are really looking for solutions. Because I tell people, do you really want to solve it? Because if you just
Yeah.
want to have the conversations back and forth, all you're doing is feeding your ego. If
That's
you
it.
want to decide, is the men's issues or the women's issues the worser sins in our society right now, unproductive, you weren't trying to
Yep.
find solutions.
Yep.
But for
Definitely.
those that want to, the models tell me, leave them, let
Leave
them be,
them.
because
Leave
they're
them.
in that is addiction. And
That's
what
it.
happens? They will be ready for change when they get sick and tired. Leave them. Don't go in there meddling. Don't be trying to upset their apple cart. Leave
Yep.
them. But for
Yes.
those that are wanting solutions, I'm going to try to make myself available by sharing this. I've been doing some morning things that share some of these principles. These are principles from nature, though. These are
Yeah.
principles from the universe that are repetitive. Some of these principles I talk about, I can tell you from a farm perspective. I can
Yeah.
tell you from a seed perspective. I can tell you about, and community, I think the solutions are going to have to be solutions that are universal. They're not going
Yeah.
to be black solutions. They're
No,
not
it's
going to
got
be
to be
white folk solutions.
universal. And it's going to
They're
have
not
to
going to be
stem
rich
from
folk.
nature too, because
They
nature
got
is
to
the
be
best
principles.
teacher, right?
This is what I find to be true. The
Yeah.
way seeds operate is true. If I
I'm
find other
telling
things
you.
that operate in that same way, I can use that model to say, wait a minute, if it worked, if everybody in my community is a seed, seeds always try to grow. They know what they're supposed to be at the core.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
environment makes a difference. If it's too hot outside and they need cold, if it's too cold outside and they need heat, if they need more soil, less soil, certain nutrients, the environment makes a difference. Let me
That's
see
it.
if that principle is true from a farming perspective. Let me see if that principle is true. I can either plant weeds or I can either plant good seeds or weeds. I'm
That's
always
it.
going to be planting seeds. Every interaction is a planting of a seed. I
Yep.
can decide which kind. The environment makes the difference. Wait a minute. That's a principle for community
Yes,
development.
it is.
Everybody's a seed. Wait a minute. That's valuable. If everybody's a seed, let me say it in another way. The inherent There is inherent worth and dignity in every person. Mm,
Yes.
same
Yes.
principle.
Everything that a seed is,
Principle.
and I say this every day, everything that a seed will ever be is inside of that seed.
Packed I've
The
said it. I used to
seed
run a
just
restaurant called
needs to
Seeds.
be placed in an environment that is conducive to its growth, right?
Nope, nope. Not every seed will germinate, but they will try.
Yeah,
They will
that's
try
what
their
I'm
best
saying.
to
That's what
germinate.
if
They
it's
will
a
try.
seed. That's what I'm saying. If
That's
it's a
right.
seed that's gonna be
Yep.
productive, it has to be
Packed
placed
into it.
in an environment that's conducive to its growth. Because
That
every
principle can
environment
shape
is not
us.
conducive to the growth of each seed. Some
That's
seeds
right.
need to be planted in the winter, and some
Yep.
in the summer, and some in the fall, and some in the spring. So
But
each
even
seed
if it's
has
out
its,
of
yeah,
season,
yep,
even if it's out of season,
it
if
will
they
still
have
grow. Yeah,
even the glimmer, you put a
yes,
little water and it's wintertime and that seed will try to germinate. Will it
yes,
survive? Nope. It's not going to survive. The chances for its survival are slim. But
yeah,
if I
it
take
will
that
still
plant
try.
inside,
Yep.
keep it warm, I got a friend that's got these Meyer lemons that are magnificent.
Okay.
I've been making tea, and I was worried because we got down to -4 wind chill in South Carolina.
Mm,
That by itself is unheard of,
yeah,
ridiculousness. But they were able to bring the tree in. So even environment makes the difference because
yeah,
even if all odds are against you, there's still the possibility of survival because
it's
seeds
still.
seeds you will never get a collard green seed that decides midway that it's going to be an apple tree. It
Mm-mm.
will stay true to its purpose. The
Thank
core
you.
is packed in. And then I start looking at that. If that's a universal truth, then I better align my social value system with that. Every
Yes.
one of us is a seed, and we
Yep.
already have packed within us our full capacity
That's
beyond
it.
what we can even reach,
That's it.
packed in.
It's
So
in you.
if all we
It's
have
in
to
you.
do is change some things,
Yeah.
then what you have is already there. If
Yep.
I take the modality of coaching that is sustainable, that says, and it's your problem, your hot
Yeah.
mess, your problem, but it's goodwill for me to help you, these
Yes.
become a part of how we create sustainable
So
solutions.
powerful. So
And so I'm
powerful.
really big on that, and I'm making myself available. I've retired so that I have time to be able to invest in this because in the
Yes.
20 years, I've seen improvements in the agricultural work. I ain't got to be a farmer no more. I've seen
Yeah.
improvements in the housing work. I ain't got to build tiny houses no more. I got one for
Yep.
sale if anybody wants to buy one. I got one left for sale. I don't have to be involved in the commerce. We've got people that are getting on board with collective and cooperative
Mm-hmm.
commerce, and they
Mm-hmm.
understand that we got to do this together, and the
Yes.
intentional community movement is building. But what I have still not seen us make stride in is solving the unsolvable problem of healing.
Yeah.
And I think I got some solutions. They
Yeah.
working for me.
Very
I'm using
powerful.
them with
You know?
clients, and they're working. And so trying to figure out how to be in this space and not allow this space to traumatize me, because I'm real trying to be efficient with my energy and use it in productive ways. I'll go play before I let you traumatize me. I'll
Say
go
it.
I'll
You
go
know
play
what? I
before.
said it ain't no
Oh,
reason why you should wake up in the morning
yeah.
in your own space and then come on a social media app and leave that app
And get
angry,
damaged and get
upset, and
damaged. Yeah.
traumatized. It ain't no reason behind that. Like that
Right.
that it shouldn't have that much effect on it shouldn't really have no effect on you at all. But if it does, then it definitely shouldn't be a negative traumatizing
Yeah.
effect, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to
Oh, I
find
got to
ways to
echo. I
safely.
got to echo. I'm gonna go out and come back in.
Okay. All right. Spiritually, good morning. Good morning. Tell me your name again in real life, if you share, or if your code name.
No, it's Yolanda. It's fine.
Okay, Yolanda.
It's actually my page is the business page, so my name, my actual.
Cool, cool. So we were just talking about, really talking about strategies for difference. I've been talking about the book Paradigms and understanding how paradigms shift and finding paradigm shifters who are trying to solve the unsolvable. And then I was talking about Jesse Collins, who is one of those paradigm shifters who back in the 70s started saying, what if we could heal? What if we could heal trauma? What if we could actually heal it? What if we could just heal it? And began finding tools that in his therapeutic research, he was seeing what should not have happened in our current paradigms thinking, but he was seeing a 100% cure rate to the PTSD clients. And some of those were high level officials within the military. So high levels of PTSD in that regard. And so it's what if we started solving problems by fixing those unfixable things in society and then come out of that. And so we've been talking about looking at solutions for community from a much more healed perspective, which requires us to really kind of come outside of the box and move into a new paradigm of thinking through our solution solving problems and really putting at the foundation for that healing. So
Right,
feel free to give any insight. I know we've had this conversation a couple of times here in the TikTok world,
right.
um,
That's
but to
the goal
share.
for my initiative specifically is to heal first, as individuals, because then we carry over that healing to others. And I think that once people see other people actively healing, they'll be more likely to, at least if you see a massive amount of people healing, I'm not gonna ignore it, especially if it's not specifically like textbook stuff, because that entering into a situation like that, there should be an understanding that everyone's healing is going to be different. And I think that we oftentimes as a society feel like there's one solution when there are multiple solutions, right? Because how I heal and how you heal are going to be totally different. Our journeys have been different. So when we understand that we're not all cookie cutter, people, we can figure out what we really need as individuals to heal. And then if everyone did that, then everyone would healing. But you gotta, convince people to basically save themselves. I think that people have been looking for an external savior for so long, they
Yeah.
are disconnected from the idea that they can help themselves.
And it's easier, if somebody would just come fix me, or if I could just buy a peel or, some quick fix approach like we would. One of the things I put on a post yesterday, but he talks about 5 characteristics for those that are really trying to be on the front side of the paradigm. And one of the things was divergent thinking. The thinking skill necessary for discovering more than one right answer. One of the
Right.
things we were talking about universal principles. One of the principles that keeps me in an intersectional space in life is the idea that one of the principles of nature that I understand from a farming perspective is diversity. In a farm, you got lots of things happening at the same time. But if you put certain crops where other crops have been, they don't go well together. You
Right, they're
can't
not gonna
grow some
thrive.
plants near certain plants. I have to put my animals in one place or they'll eat up my garden. You know,
Right,
diversity is one of those things where you have to learn to work and get yourself into a place where you can then flourish at your best potential. And so, one of those thinking ideas, one of the characteristics of those of the strategic exploration process, which is when you're trying to really anticipate the future with accuracy, is divergent thinking. And I think sometimes in conversations, we have them because we're trying to convince everyone that one idea is the only idea. And I think definitely compatible diversity. I think that being able to do divergent thinking, it's like, well, why can't we not do that? I come like every answer to many of the things when I have discussions is ego. Because I think that my answer is the only right answer. You know, my
right,
healing modality is the thing for everybody. This is it. Nope, sure ain't. Some people may need a little bit of Jesus, but some folk gonna need some yoga, some medication, and some therapy. You know, like it's not a one size fits all, but even being able to have the consideration of multiple things, sometimes we can't do that as a product of our damage, as a product of our need to feed our ego, which is the illogical way we handle life sometimes. And many of us, when we have layers, if you have been in life for any amount of time, you've probably got layers just like I realized. I got layers of stuff. And
right.
even though I'm dealing with it, I got layers of stuff that's ego. And I feed it in the same illogical ways. It was like me going and getting that pizza with all that cheese on it after living a clean lifestyle and then wondering why I got mucus floating in my body. You know, like, girl, you crazy. You couldn't have figured that out in advance. I could have, but I was living in my damage. I wanted some comfort food. I was fixing an emotional need because I wasn't feeling good. And I'm single. I wasn't nobody cooking for me. I got to go home and eat, and I'm gonna get up in the bed and I don't feel good. And I just want something that makes me feel good. I'm gonna go get this pizza from the drive-through and go back home and get up in the bed and nurse my, you know, I understand the reasons. It's because I was damaged. I got issues. And life is a journey. And so I don't know if I'll be healed probably in my coffin or whatever my children do. I'm like my daddy. Put me in when I'm done, put me in a Ziploc bag and throw me out back. Don't waste no money on that. Don't waste it. My dad literally told me that. Put me in a Ziploc bag and throw me out back. And I'm Charlie's daughter with Charlie's corny sense of humor. And I told the funeral man that. My daddy would like a Ziploc bag and we're taking it out back. And the man says, ma'am, ma'am, okay, we're gonna get one of them boxes because I'm trying to make a space for my brother to come to the funeral to have some closure. But my daddy meant that thing. But divergent. Let me
Oh,
the other parts: influence, understanding, the ability to be able to understand what influences your perspective as you set out on new exploration. You got to know how to do that. Divergent thinking we just talked about. Convergent thinking, the thinking skills that allow the focused integration of data and the prioritizing of choices. Mapping, the capacity to draw pathways to show you how to get from the present to the future. And imaging, the ability to picture in words or drawings or models what you found in your exploration of the future. Like he says, these five characteristics, being able to do these gives you some powerful tools when you are trying to explore and discover and anticipate the future. Now, he was talking about this from a business standpoint, but it is the best descriptive if we're trying to anticipate the future societal paradigm shift. You got to be able to do those five things. And for a lot of us, me, I had to heal my ego to be able to even begin to consider those alternative opinions and divergent and convergent thinking. And it's hard work. That's why I think we don't do it. Looking at yourself honestly in the mirror, it's hard. It's hard,
it is.
especially on the front side of healing.
I'm sorry. Um, yeah, no, and I think that there's a great misconception that that being that healing is
Yes.
easy for people, right? Because people go, um they present the great side of it. They present
Yeah.
the loving, nice, happy side of it, but they don't talk about the nights when they're crying, in darkness, worrying, working on themselves, and acknowledging things about themselves. There's a lot that comes with the healing, and when you go deep enough within self to like really heal those traumas and face them head on,
Mhm.
it's not easy at all. And
Yeah.
I agree. I think that that's why a lot of people avoid it, because it's a lot easier to try to find solutions outside of yourself. But then, what I think most don't understand is that you're setting yourself up for continued failure because you're not addressing the issue yourself. It's just temporary satisfaction and
Yeah.
temporary um, appeasement to things that are not going to go away if they're not dealt with directly by you as an
And
individual.
And the strategy for me has been follow the model. The model says go find the shifters. Go find the ones that are tinkering with the unsolvable problem. Healing's too hard. What if somebody says I can make it easier?
Right,
Shifter might be a shifter. Follow them. Follow that shifter.
right,
What if someone says it can heal all kinds of trauma, big and small stuff? Oh, that's an unsolvable problem that we're saying can't be done. What if someone were able to do that? And I began intentionally looking for those shifters in the healing space. And that's how I came upon Jesse Collins. For those that came in later, he's a guy back in the 70s started talking about it, and he has made claims that he can heal in a therapeutic research setting that he's been able to prove and stand behind his word. There's a website with some of his information, etiotropic.com. It's kind of obscure, but I began looking intentionally for the shifters that could help solve that problem, because the formula that I found was that if we're going to fix community, the first thing we have to do is value transformation work, and that's really healing. We
right,
live out of those values. Healing work. So we got to find a solution for it. It's non-negotiable.
right,
Then social service becomes relevant. How do you help people do things they value to do but can't do on their own? And social service comes in all kinds of ways. We think of it sometimes when we think about poor people's services, but social services are the helping. If you don't know how to heal, somebody helping you is social services. Because it's not my job to help nobody heal their stuff. It's not my responsibility. I can volunteer into that role, and I can do it because it's goodwill for the community sometimes, but I do it not out of obligation. I do it out of goodwill. Then we've got to have commerce. We've got to have economics. But I started realizing that if I use that formula, guess what I don't have to do? I don't have to fight fires. I don't have to have a special program for fixing the environment. I help people heal and then they go fix the environment. I don't have to have a special program to
right,
fix racism. We heal people and then they stop doing the things that are the product of that unhealed place. If we heal people, then they no longer need to have one person be better, or that they think that their rules are the rules for everyone else. So we fix things like transphobia, where I'm trying to decide who you sleeping with. I don't want you to decide who I sleep with, and I don't want to have to be responsible for no one and being involved with who you sleep with. But if I'm healed and I can understand that what's right for me may not be right for you, you may be in a Christian paradigm box. I'm okay with that if we're getting to the same end, but is it okay if I just choose not to be in that box or in a box that fits as tightly as yours does? Maybe my concept of God is different, but what if you were able to allow me to explore in my own way? Like if we fix people, we fix
right,
the problems of society that are the product of people in their dysfunction. And that to me felt like the most efficient route to get us into a regenerative mode of doing community. The quickest, fastest, most painless process that we can do. Wouldn't we go straight for the core? And
right,
so, in the consulting work that I do now in my retirement, the training, I have a 2 year training program that specifically is personal, spiritual, but also community and economic development tool that helps. My calling is specifically to leaders. If you are a faith leader, a community organizer, or an intentional community builder who's building physical intentional communities, there's a whole intentional community space that I work with you on making sure that I help you develop in ways that seem sustainable using this formula. Does your leadership, are they doing healing so that you guys have a playing field that's even? that you have the tools for being able to resolve conflict. Because in life, because we got issues, we will have conflict. It's not negotiable. It's going to happen. And then from there, build. Do you understand about buying land? Do you understand about deciding on housing and the ramifications? Have you thought about organizational structures? There's some governance structures that feel more sustainable. And then walk them through the economics. How do you create sustainable economics? Businesses that work together, and which kinds of structures to be able to do that. And so find solutions. But then I also offer to individuals this healing work to be able to teach how to do this as a framework so it too can become a framework for living life. For me, this has become the first nature of how I process. And so, like I shared earlier, the situation with my mother and her funeral, that could have been a traumatizing situation that could have left me traumatized for decades to come. But in 10 minutes and 2 and 3.5 blocks, I was able to resolve the situation and resolve it where it no longer causes even the uncomfortable emotions. Like, what if we helped people also do that? And I think we can. I think we can. I think it's imperative because if not, we cannot fix society in ways that are sustainable. We have to keep doing behavior modification, and we're seeing that's wearing us down. There's no more. How many more laws we gonna put in place telling people not to do stuff that they really want to do? You
Right.
know, it's
I,
addiction. It works the same way.
I think that the system, the way that society is specifically set up is, to encourage those behaviors because you don't. If you tell a child not to do something over and over and over again, it's gonna make them more curious and they're gonna be more likely to do it because you're telling them. So it's the positive negative reinforcement. It's like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. But then they're waiting for you to do it because they know it's almost like hypnosis and or brainwashing. If you say something or you show somebody something enough, then they become more curious about it. This is why when they had that Netflix series about the serial killer. I'm not even going to say his name because he don't need no props from me. But that kind of stuff, like watching and obsessing over stuff like that, I think it plants seeds, and there's specific types of movies and stuff that do the same. So when you're constantly um, introducing negative things into people's lives, but telling them the negative consequences. But why not just encourage the positive behavior and the positive consequences? If we focus more on saying, "Oh, this is I did this. I'd like to share that with you. Let's try doing this, or can we try doing that? Can we?" But if you introduce that enough times, people start to do it, right? If you say, "Hey, you know what? I want to go and meditate." Like this is how trends are started, right? And this
Yeah.
is this is if you make it heal, if you make it fun to heal, then people are more likely going to, lean toward that because it's what they're being exposed to on a regular basis. But if we're constantly exposed to negative actions, negative acts, negative consequences, that's what we're hearing about.
Yeah.
Which is
I agree in part with
I,
that. Part of that is I agree with. The other part, there's a
so I,
part of me, mhm, you, you getting choppy. Spiritually, Yolanda, you're getting choppy. Part of that I agree with. Part of that though is I am on the end of the paradigm that says I ain't got the energy to sugarcoat it. Healing hurts. It's painful. It's painful. Get in when you're ready. If you're not committed, don't jump in. Don't
exactly.
jump in. Keep doing what you're doing. Do the best you can. Behavior modification
Right.
works for those situations. If you're ready to heal, I want to be honest with you. I want to be honest because to not be honest with you paints a picture that you can do this on just some light surface level. Nope. If you really want to heal. And I think the question that King brings up, what values replace our current value system? I think part of it is I have some ideas of some foundational covenants, and it stems from the inherent worth and dignity of all people. It stems from we are an interconnected web. We're connected, even if we don't understand how. We're connected. When I exhale, if I'm exhaling toxins in my environment, there's an impact that has that's universal. I believe in some of the stuff with epigenetics that says everything, every breath I breathe in is a product of something else that's happening outside. There's some connectedness. But I think part of what I see as much more practical is as we heal, we collectively can have the conversations about what our new social values are going to be in this emerging paradigm. I
Pretend
hope. I hope that those social values are things that say things like
That it's not
destroying our earth is not a good thing, and
popular.
so
Healing
poisoning that.
isn't pop.
Mhm. Speak up. I think she's having some. I think there's some technical things going on with Yolanda's voice in. But I think that collectively, like if I set up the values, you can't do that in isolation. It has to be a community collective. Um, and I think that we can't even have those conversations about our values right now because our ego's in the way. So we talk about environmentalism. We if we ego, then we can't have the conversation that says, hold on, poison of any kind is a bad thing. Can we agree on that? Can we agree that poisoning our water in any kind of way is a bad thing? Now, let's talk about the ways that we poison our water. Let's talk about the practicalities. There's some things that we do that are going to have a toxic impact. I don't care. If you're a farmer and you're farming that land, you're causing some sort of destruction on some level. You got to dig that ground up. Hopefully you're using organic practices. Hopefully you're doing regenerative farming. But in order for us to continue right now, there's some damage that's being done. But what I propose as a more practical approach is if we start investing in healing, then we are better able to create a new social paradigm of values, a new acceptable set of norms. And hopefully those norms look like we are going to treat people with respect and dignity. We're just gonna give it to them that if you are alive, you are owed basic respect and dignity. Don't care what color package you came into, don't care which gender, don't care who you sleep with, don't care what your political affiliations or your income. This is going to be a new norm for us. And so anything that's outside of that norm is going to become intolerable, and we're going to speak out against it. We're going to invest in how our children having loving, life embracing places to live. And what that may do is that may force us to go back and look at our educational system to see if it aligns with those values. You can't build community in silos. It needs us all working together to be able to build community. And so I think a practical approach first have to do some healing with the mindfulness and intention that we're doing this healing so that we can have greater capacity to create solutions sustainable.
Right.
And so we have all the answers. I have a beginning point and a bridge to be able to help us begin where we are to where we're going. I look for those shifters in the healing space because I think that is an imperative foundation for us to address and invest in. And because I believe in Barker's model of how paradigms shift and the characteristics of identifying a shifter, when I saw Jesse Collins' work, I said, he's a shifter. He's a shifter that says, I'm just going to throw the box away. And this is, again, coming from the therapeutic mental health space. I'm going to throw those boxes away because it ain't working. I'm not getting a 100% cure rate on trauma. They got to keep come seeing me. I'm developing a dependency. They got to be dependent on me to come over and over and over again and be able to heal. He throws that out and says, what if I start from a totally different space of can we heal it? Can I heal trauma? Still unpopular. He's still the shifter. Shifters are usually treated a certain kind of way. They usually are thought to be crazy. It's impossible. There's a set of characteristics. It can't be done. We don't do things like that. It's not possible. That's just not how it works. It
That's
can't
so
be.
true.
That's how shifters are treated. Well, as I learned that, I began to be careful. Don't you say those things. Listen to what they're saying. Maybe they're wrong, but they're usually tinkerers where one piece of it's right. He was right on healing PTSD. He didn't understand that it
Right.
also was
Hmm.
conflict resolution. He didn't understand it was processing skills. He didn't understand it was emotional intelligence building. He didn't understand it helped people develop a system for having critical thinking, the common sense stuff we say that's not common. He didn't understand that, but he was a tinkerer. And because I recognized it, I began looking and playing with his tool. I began tinkering with it in real time. I began using it in personal ways. Can this do those
Right.
things for me? And as tinkerers do, I'm a tinkerer, I'm a shifter in this community development space. This has been 20 years of life work, sometimes paid, sometimes self funded, or otherwise. But as I began, it was like, how do shifters then operate? It's the Nikola Teslas. I've been looking in modern society. Who are some of the shifters right now? I have a short list of some of the shifters right now. Will I Am, musician. I've listened to some
Yep.
of his interviews. He's a shifter. I'm not in the rap culture. I did not grow up rap. I was a 9-year-old kid listening to jazz. You know, Miles Davis and Santana in the Park in San Francisco. Um,
Yes, yes.
but I've been looking at some of these pop culture. Is Kanye a shifter? Interesting. I'm still kind of playing with that. But Dame Dash, he's
I'm
somebody
not
I wasn't
sure.
familiar with by the characteristics that he gives. Now, is he a mature, healed shifter? Absolutely not. But might be a shifter. Dame Dash is one that I look at because I'm looking at a cross spectrum of society. Where are our shifters? Because it tells us if we go find them, they have the capacity. If they do healing, they have the capacity to help us move the paradigm faster than anyone others. So I'm watching for them in society. And so I have a short list of who those shifters are. The reality is, if you get a healed shifter, they'll take you faster than you can get on shifting your paradigm and
Well, the
making really big social moves.
my thing is, I just want to reiterate. I was definitely not promoting that section, like the popularity part, and I
Oh, yeah,
think
yeah.
that he specifically is not popular because it's not easy,
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
that was where I was going with that. But
for sure.
as far as the shifters are concerned in like mainstream, I think it's going to be hard to address, and or they're not going to be at a certain level. Like, okay, Dave Chappelle, shifter, right? Because he
Ooh, wait,
used
wait, 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 wait. But I would say maybe not. Because, like, there's some specific characteristics to look for. Just because they're considered progressive doesn't make them a shifter. And so understanding these principles has been real key for me because there's a certain, I'm not saying that he's not, but there's a certain set of characteristics. And sometimes it's not the people that we see as progressives. There's a certain listening that I do that give me some indications based on this particular model, based on the model that Joel Barker talks about as far as what a paradigm shifter looks like, what a pioneer looks like, what the settler characteristics are. I don't know if Dave Chappelle is one that I would put into
I,
that category.
I think he more was like just protecting himself from certain
Yeah,
groups
yeah.
of people. But
I'll look at him.
but
I'll come back to
it
that conversation though. I'm
it,
going to go look at him a little more.
it gets a bit different though. But he is though. Dave Chappelle lives on a farm. He's different than what most people would consider like
Okay.
a comic comedian. He
Okay.
doesn't live in like the middle of Hollywood and living in that type of stuff. He's
Okay.
from what I know, he lives on a farm with his family, quiet, doesn't eat meat, stays to himself, which is completely opposite of typical Hollywood stuff. They're
Right.
more in
Right.
the limelight, like centering themselves, and I think that so I don't know if I would go as far as to say that he's a shifter, but anyone who chooses to live outside of normal societal
Yeah.
habits, I would consider to be some sort of the shifter, because you're now protecting your energy and healing in silence with some solitude away from all of the hustle and bustle of things. But I what I was going to say is that it gets tougher. Like, the more money people have in this industry, the harder it is for them to separate themselves from being controlled and or manipulated by the people who sign those checks.
Right.
So that's the only thing I would think would pose a problem, because when if they're a shifter, they have to be able to shift. And if other people are pulling the strings, you're not really shifting, the way that you would want to freely. You know what I'm saying? I think that there are
Yeah.
limitations and NDAs and certain rules that come with a certain dollar amount if it's made in specific industries in this society that we're actively living in.
So I agree with the concept. That, though, does not fit the vocabulary that he uses that I think is more robust. That might be more so of a pioneer and not a shifter. So there are some definite, there's some characteristics that he gives, and this becomes, sometimes vocabulary becomes convoluted because people then use those terms and they're not based on anything. This guy gives some foundation for how he uses that terminology that
Right.
provides a very good social triage skill for being able to understand, because it's the characteristics and how that person operates in functions in society as it relates to change dynamics. So I'm agreeing with your concept. That would not be Barker, that would not fit squarely under Barker's explanation of shifter. That would probably be somewhere in the pioneer category of characteristics, but I'm definitely on board with what you're saying. Absolutely. Look for those outliers. I want to give time. Rings, our king jumped in.
Yeah.
If there's anybody else that wants to jump into this conversation, I'd love to have the dialogue.
Okay. It's R. King Salver. It's a little head nod to one of my favorite authors, whose last name is King Salver.
Okay.
I wanted to ask a question. Would you mind sharing one or two of the characteristics of a shifter?
Sure. And let me go. I play with this a lot, so I know it theoretically, but I want to reference straight to this. And he talks about different kinds of shifters as it relates to the programs. Okay, who changes paradigms? Let's go here. I talked a little bit about those who are usually what you hear, but shifters, he groups them into four categories of people. They are the ones that one could be the maverick, young person, fresh out of training. You've got all this knowledge and you're put into a situation, but you haven't learned the rules of how that, from the business standpoint, the rules of the industry. You just know there's a
Mm-hmm.
problem. And he gives an example that you take this young person fresh out of school and you, as the hiring manager, you say, here's a list of our unsolvable problems. Find a solution. And you don't tell them it's
Mm-hmm.
unsolvable. You make them think that they can solve the problem. And 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100 will say, nope, couldn't find a solution. But you find that one that didn't know it was an unsolvable problem. And they come back and say, here's a solution. Kind of a maverick.
Mm-hmm.
Another kind of a shifter is someone that comes, they may be an older person coming out of a field where they come into a new space and there's some transference. I'm a farmer. You put me in some situations and I go pull from my farm wisdom and say, let me think about these universal principles. I want to build sustainable community. Let me think about the principles I learned from farming, and
Mm-hmm.
they're able to take that and come and they begin part of a group of people that begin solving the unsolvable problems in your paradigm, whatever that paradigm may be, if it's the workplace or if it's something else. Then you may have someone who is the maverick. They're kind of jack of no trades, but master of a whole lot of things. They see the existing paradigm, but they really don't fit into that. They're the fringe. That would be what he considers kind of the maverick shifter. They're the fringe, on the fringe edge of disciplines. They know stuff, but they don't really fit in. They're the science person who doesn't do science the way science says it's supposed to be done. So they do this out of the box research and then all of a sudden find a solution. And people say, but you can't be done that way. And they say, but I did. So now what? And then he
Mm-hmm.
talks about the tinkerer, someone who is characteristically someone that tinkers. They look at that problem and they say, I wonder how we could make that better. Huh, I could do that. There are people that if you have something broke at your house, call them, and they will with a hammer and a screwdriver and some junk laying around sit and figure out a solution for you. That's a shifter kind of personality, that tinkerer personality. And like I said, you can be a shifter in one area of your life and not another. But he gives those characteristics of people who then begin doing things outside of the box. Those are some of the characteristics. There's some deeper levels to that and some things that I've learned just through experience that give better definitions. But they're usually the ones that don't ever ask the question of can it be done? They say, how
Mm.
can we do this? I got a
A lot
problem.
of your language reminds me of Octavia Butler. Are you familiar with her?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of your language reminds me of her. Even the shifter, because of shape shifting that happened in the book Dawn, and then with Parable of the Sower, her mantra being God is change, and that like reorienting people's understanding that change is something that cannot be avoided and is best addressed with compatible diversity. So having only one kind of person doesn't allow for society to flourish. But our current culture seems to seek that out, right? to compete until there's only one standing. Compete until
You
there's
want to
only one person standing. Highlander, there can only be one. So we have like this whole fictional romanticization of individual, not just individualism, because that individualism is necessary, but again towards homogeny, where there's only one kind of beauty, where there's only one kind of intelligence, where there's only one God. I mean, I know that might be a little deep to get into because some people don't want to discuss the abstract, but I think that because we have already romanticized the concept of one, it limits our ability to recognize multiplicity as equally and sometimes more a more fitting modality to refer to when it's time to problem solve.
You mentioned Octavia Butler, and that made me think of another in pop culture who I think is a brilliant shifter in that space. Is Issa Rae?
Yeah,
Oh
Do you,
yeah,
you know that show that the series that she did, 5 seasons she did of
like insecurity.
insecure,
Insecure.
insecure.
She is, and I've had the opportunity of watching that. I'm going to watch it again and take notes because I could teach from that. But what she does that's brilliant is she starts, and in season one, her characters, they dysfunctional, they hot messes, they value systems, they interactions with each other are a hot mess. But what she does in 5 seasons is she takes her characters through healing. And what you begin to see, she masterfully does this, is you begin to see them living a healed and more healed and progressively healed set of values. And in the final episode, you see these people saying things like, I was getting ready to do that destructive thing. And I said, self, we ain't doing that. We healing. And you see the
Mm,
thing. And I said, it's masterful because whatever the audience was when they chimed in season one, they may have been a hot mess too, because they were saying, yeah, girl, look at this. Uh-huh. And they was putting a battery in the back of all the behavior. But if she caught them in season one and they stuck with her, then what she did was she began to change their value system. She began to say, girl, your behavior sleeping with these men is dysfunctional and it's hurting you. And she began to say, and I got to do differently. And I got to change me. I got to heal. And she was able to take in 5 seasons an audience with her all the way through a progression to a healthier place. She left her audience better. Masterful, masterful.
mm-hmm.
There's a few
Mm-hmm.
other series
Okay.
that I watch that start with the healthy perspective. So you're only going to tap in to watch that if you already on the healthy perspective. It's one called it's a show and the lady's a witch or something in this little town and she got a little shop. I forget what it's called. It's out of my mind right now. But I say she starts from a healthy perspective. All the interactions are about health, where they're calling each other on unhealthy stuff. The norm is health. But there's some like Issa that takes a journey that I think is a masterful way of using our social platforms, the media. There's singers who do this. They sing songs. Erica Badu tell y'all she been telling y'all all along. But we got some new ones like Jamila Woods, who puts a song out called Holy that says, I am going to see the worth and dignity in myself. I am holy. It ain't just Mary and Jesus and whatever else you call holy. I am holy. And we're seeing that. We're seeing Samba the Great say it's energy. The flow of your energy, if you got it wrapped up in negativity, if you're spending your life energy on negativity, you get what you fuel. And so we're seeing some masterful ways from shifters in different places. When India are talking about it and wearing
Yeah,
clothes
no,
that wasn't showing and shaking everything, she was the she was against the systems of music right now, especially black music and black women in music. She was the shifter. Tracy Chapman back in
I
the
was gonna just say
80s
that.
was saying new beginnings. She said, we got to start all over. We just throw it
Mm-hmm.
out, throw it out, throw it out.
Child, don't
That's
get me
that's
singing
the
because I can't.
paradigm model. That's the model of paradigms. It says paradigms die. You have to create
Yes.
new paradigms that supplant then the old one when you get to that tipping point. Maxwell writes a
Yes.
book that explains tipping points to understand how social tipping points happen. That's why we can't get everybody healed first. We got to go heal the shifters and pioneers first. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
prepared with leaders to be able to help when the shifting point happens, when the crack happens in society. We have futurists that have predicted. I was in that pool of futurists. I worked with the guy who now is running Materium. He's at a blockchain, but he and I worked 10 years ago. When is the social paradigm going to crack and get ready to shift? Can we
Mm-hmm.
anticipate that? We use these models. And 2 years ago, one of the white papers we wrote for the Pentagon, where we said to them 10 years ago, we can do the logistics and we can do the social transformation. And they said, it's not possible. It's not possible. And I said, I'll be doggone, it is. I'm going to go figure out how. I'm going to figure out. And 10 years later, the white paper predictions, we said there's 5 indicators. When you see them cracking, be careful. You got a couple of years for major crisis to happen in society. And 2 years ago, everything, I used to say 4 of the 5, but all of the indicators we said started happening. And I went, guess who I'm going to believe first? I'm going to believe these shifters that said we better be able to heal it. Because if you can't heal it, you ain't got no solutions. None. None whatsoever. None, 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 none. You can't fix it because we can't behavior modify us out of that. We see in that. You had enough rules you can put in place to make the police that have issues in their heart with people better. And it's not enough money you can throw at racism to fix it if you don't heal people. Only you can
Mm-hmm.
behavior modification. What other laws you gonna put in place? What other laws
Mm-hmm.
can we put in place? We already know you don't put your hands on another individual without their permission. We already have laws that tell you that. You ain't got to be black, white for that law to apply. We have rules that say that already. Behavior modification, we're running out of that being an option. And our paradigm is dying because those solutions no longer work. And so
Mm-hmm.
part of my agenda is about do what Tracy Chapman said. She said you got to get whole new words. If you got to create new symbols and vocabulary, do it, but start all
Yes.
over again. Start all over again. That was in the 80s. She was saying that. Guess what we did to
Mm-hmm.
her in the 80s? She must be a this. She just a da 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 interderogatory name about someone whose sexual preferences are out in the open. What did
Mm-hmm.
we do to her? But I can take you back 100 years. Tesla was a shifter. If
Mm-hmm.
Tesla had been supported, and it wasn't supported because the value system says money is more important, but if he had,
Mm-hmm.
the environmental issues that we're dealing with now would not be an issue. 100 years later, guess what we're trying to do? Can we find that stuff that Tesla said? Maybe we could provide free energy to the world that didn't poison the world. Maybe we could do that. We haven't lost some of them
Mm-hmm.
values of greed though. We got to fix greed though to be able to get a good heal from that. But what
Yeah.
if we had supported shifters and my life the examples that I have gleaned from using this model says, you know what? If we had supported them shifters, give them a safe space so they didn't end up broke, destitute, and run out of town with their name criticized as if they were some pariah to society, if we support them and create safe spaces for them to flourish and heal, they will get us out of this mix. They're going to give us the quickest, fastest way out of this mix. We can either get out of this mix going 90 miles an hour or we can get out of this mix going 2 miles an hour. Which speed should we want to get out of the crisis before the crisis comes? For me, the strategy for sustainable community is let's get out the quickest, fastest, least painful way possible. And that is let's support the shifters and the pioneers. Let's help them have the tools to heal because that's got to be the foundation. But if we begin to support them, they will then do things like have those conversations with all that data and be able to help us prioritize the values that get us to where we want to go. They can do the visioning to say, where are we trying to get to? What do we want society to look like? I know it's looking like a hot mess right now, but what do we want it to look like? Because if all I can do
Mm-hmm.
is talk about the hot mess it is, I can't envision what we're trying to build if we spend our energy in that direction. Could we perhaps present a better solution? And can we do it before crisis comes? Because it's hard as hell to do this kind of work as deeply as we need to in the midst of crisis, especially if we don't have leaders that can live it. The fake it till you make it
Mm-hmm.
days are over. I appreciate Les Brown and what he gave to that generation, but that is the dying paradigm, just like singing, being a cage bird singing. That's my mother's
Mm-hmm.
generation. That's my grandmother's generation. And there's some of us daughters that need to heal those generations that are still alive. I didn't have the opportunity with my mother and grandmother. They chose not to. Alzheimer's took the capacity from my grandmother, and my mother made a conscious decision not to. But if we begin to do that work, then this generation's message isn't what Maya Angelou's message was to my mother and grandmother. This generation's message will be there is no cage. And if you feel you are in a cage, you have the capacity to reach out, open that door, and get yourself out. Because what you need is out here. What you need to live a fulfilled life is out here. What you need to reach the best potential that your seed can give is out here, but it's outside of this cage. How do we help create the bridges for us to get there? And that's really what my platform is about. And hopefully, I'll be able to use this space. If nothing else, I've planted some seeds in y'all to give you something to think about. I'm doing my work. I'm doing my work because that's
Mm-hmm.
what it looks like. Kenny Pops, welcome back. King Solver, spiritually, I'm glad you're here. Feel free to jump in. That's really what I had to share today about that tidbit, one of the components of understanding the paradigm shifting and how that's giving me a little bit of the guide road in building a bridge to our new paradigm. I appreciate everyone involved. So feel free if you guys have got some things to share or input or experiences from your life. I like experience because that takes it out of the theoretical into the practical. So what's working for you, you know?
Right.
So feel free.
Actual life experience.
I think Yolanda's going in and out. Signal technology. It works when it works. Yay. But Kenny Pops, our
Mm-hmm.
King Solver. Oh, Yolanda, you're back. I think you're in and out.
I'm gonna drop down and come back up so I can have a better
Gotcha,
service.
gotcha. Kenny Pops, welcome back.
Yeah, I'm here, goddess.
Any input? Any input? Anywhere else
No,
that you guys
I mean,
would like
I
to
feel like
come from?
what you've been saying is just what needs to be said. You know what I'm saying? Honestly, we just gotta focus on healing and know that we can. You know, like what we need is there. What we need
Yeah.
is there. Stop you complaining about being in a box, but you're not opening the door, and you got the capacity to. You know.
If anyone needs some guidelines, my website, and I am not a web developer, so if you go in there looking for shiny, you ain't gonna find it. You find me, and I'm retired, and have chosen how much energy I can spend into it. But there's
Yeah.
information about the book Uncovered, and then from there it's on Amazon. And if you're on Amazon, you can click my name. The newest journal book that gives you the prompts that model after Jesse Collins' healing modality.
Okay.
It's also what I use in the healing retreats. I will be offering healing retreats this year. It's one of the things I will do in my retirement. I just finished the flyer. I'll be offering some limited retreats in Ecuador. I have a home in Ecuador that hopefully my vision is for it to be a healing center.
Okay.
And connect with other healing practitioners. So if you're a healing practitioner and want to collaborate on some retreats,
Okay.
and so I will be doing healing retreats specifically with my focus of women and families. So if individuals are looking to do really invest in their own time, it's an all-inclusive healing vacation. Everything from your meals to some of the excursions and pampering and your lodging and everything
Yeah.
is a part of that with time in Cuenca,
Oh, I'm
Ecuador.
sorry.
Airfare is not included, but all of your air transfers are. So if you have individuals or if you are planning a family vacation and you want your family to intentionally invest in healing, we now have the capacities there to be able to do that. I
Yeah.
do the healing retreats here in the States. As long as I have at least 4 individuals that will be participating, I can coordinate them in an area that's convenient to you. I do them a lot of times using my timeshare and the condos that my timeshare system has because it makes it a
Okay.
little more affordable. But as long as I have 4 people, I will come to any community around the states to be able to teach and train. I also may be doing some online classes, but I find that I really want to work with the ones who are wanting to work deeply, especially those who are wanting to work deeply so that they can then help others as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I also have one of the other things that I'll be doing in my retirement is I have a 2-year program that's geared for faith leaders. So if there's churches or other kinds of faith organizations, community organizers, those that are doing social justice advocacy work, and or those that are building intentional communities in real time, I have a 2-year program that works with them and also provides some of the development consulting services. I really enjoy program development, so it also
Okay.
works with helping them heal, but I give them training on all of the other tools that I really have that I call it's a social tech toolbox, the tools that you need. So I go into depth in not only teaching them the paradigm models for identifying themselves, but I teach them how to use these tools for interacting successfully in life. And I go
Yeah.
through several of the other models in depth and teach them how to then be leaders and teachers within their own community. I don't have the capacity to do deep work with a lot of people in mass. I want to work with the leaders who then do in
Yeah,
places of
definitely.
influence.
Definitely.
Um, Church leaders who don't understand that this is discipleship work in that vocabulary system. Businesses or organizations that want to do value based transformation in the social service work they do so that they're not part of the problem. And people that are building physical communities to make sure they have a foundation. Like, have you thought about how you guys are going to deal with conflict? Like, from the start, before we do any healing work, do you have a way for being able to deal with conflict? Let's learn
Yeah.
these tools so that when you
Yeah.
sit down, you have a means to be able to have a level playing field for everyone that chooses to participate at that table. And
Yeah,
so
because some
those are some
people
of the
don't
things
know
I
the
have done.
importance of having plans for conflict resolution in place, you know?
Until you get into a hot mess of dysfunction in your organization. And then,
Yeah.
whoop, but crisis shifts paradigm. So sometimes I recognize that they need that crisis. If you didn't think that it was important before, let you go buy some land with a group of people and got some money on the line, and y'all got a hot mess of dysfunction. I'm watching a community not far from me that I've been watching for 5 years. They did that in Jesus'
Yeah.
name. They were the faith communities, and now it's a hot mess. They've
Yep.
embarrassed themselves in the community. They've gotten into some bad relationships with the government in that community because they don't know how to behave in ways that are appropriate. Like, the
Yeah.
reality is, in some places there's laws like you can't go buck some zoning laws. You can until you get caught, but when you get caught, if you have violated the zoning laws in your area, they will shut your stuff down.
Yeah.
They will shut you down. Like, that's just real life. And so a lot of people don't go into it. That's why consultants are still here. I enjoy my work in that space, but
Yeah.
those are some things that I will be offering. It's how do I manage my personal balance, because I'm still healing. My next layer
Yeah.
of healing is dealing with the physical aspects of healing. For me, I have not done right by my body.
Yes.
I have worked 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I can do that for long stretches at a time. I'm built like that. I'm wired like that. That
Yeah.
ain't good. That
Not
ain't,
good at
that
all.
ain't girl. Don't
Not
stop
good
bragging
at
about that.
all.
Girl, that's dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Dysfunctional. And
Yeah.
so,
But that, you know,
for
I went
me,
through that was part of my healing though.
mhm,
Realizing that working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week,
fear.
and then coming home and not having nothing to show for it was not healthy, you know?
But we do it. Addiction. We do it because we're afraid.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that if I don't, I got 35, 40 employees that are expecting me to sign their paychecks and
Yeah.
expecting those checks to actually flow. Fear, though.
Yeah.
Fear is what's
Fear.
driving
Yeah.
it.
The
And
fear.
so we become
Yeah.
illogical when we burn ourselves out. So for me, when people say, well, are you healing? Absolutely. I do the personal ego stuff every time it comes up, every time I see
Yeah.
it. But for me, that healing is forcing me now to say, okay, now what's your next deep dive? My place in Ecuador is part of my next deep dive. I want to connect with shamans because I'm really looking at this idea of how do we have modern day shamans? Shamans
Yeah.
used to use tools in their community to keep their community centered.
Yeah.
you know it was a centering process. And so I'm going to be living part-time where I can absolutely have access to those kinds of things, in addition
Definitely.
to weather that's conducive to healing, where food is going to be accessible, where I can get natural medicines and shaman medicine and use
Definitely.
all the tools available to me to figure out how we can even quicker heal.
Yeah.
um, but I'm creating a space where I'm looking for shifters who are absolutely about healing, like the mind, body, soul
Yes.
diversity of healing.
Yes.
And part of the space there is envisioned to be an intentional community for healers that want to interact in that way, a space where you'll be able to collaborate. And we have healing retreats that may have my healing components, but you may be able to add some of the physical and the health components to that, or
Yeah.
some of the other modalities that I think are that duality. Like, we need everything working for us.
Yeah.
And
We
for
need everything working for us, you know, and
some
that's
people's
it.
boxes are more limited. Some people are in a very specific faith box: Baha'i, Muslim, Christian, Hebrew, Israelite, whatever,
Yeah.
Judaism, whatever. For some, though, they are in a much broader box. And for those that are shifters in this paradigm, I'm finding they are the ones whose boxes are broad. And
Yeah.
I'm looking to connect with those because that gives us the quickest, fastest healing. And so those are just some of my retirement tinkerings because I'm a tinkerer that
Okay.
I'm working on that. I've got land in Georgia that is also envisioned to be that same thing here. It's in a place called Deep Steps. So I'm looking for those that want to build real communities and that
Yeah.
are a part of that intentional community movement where we say, what if we started building community from the core up? What if
Yeah.
we
From the
started from,
core. Yeah. Build a
if you
community
ain't
from the
good, you ain't
core.
competent.
Yeah.
Start from there. Then let's put in place the housing, the food, the
Yeah.
economic system, the social services. Let's do that then, especially if it's people that are trying to heal communities. So
Mm-hmm.
those are some of
Because
my,
the
I
issue is that
retired.
we trying to go in and fix what's already been broken, instead of going back and breaking it all up and
It
healing
ain't
from the
working for 'em.
core. You got to heal all the way from the core.
King Solver, thank you for adding to our conversation today. I think I want to give just 2 or 3 more minutes and wrap it up. Because that taking care of myself, I want to go get some tea and put some fuel in my body. But I appreciate you all allowing me to share because part of that is good for me to be able to share and share with people who find value in that. That is affirming and that is good medicine for me too. So I appreciate you all allowing me to share what I
Definitely.
found in my journey. If I can be of resource to any of you, I hope that we can have these conversations on an ongoing pace about, okay, what you doing, sis? What you doing, bro? What you guys doing?
Yeah.
How you guys,
Yeah.
what's healing? What you working? What's healing in your life right now? How are you healing today? Instead of just how you doing, where we get to say, I'm all right. Nope. How
Right.
are you healing
Right.
today? What you
Those
struggling with?
that's
How can I help you with your struggle? How can you help me with mine? Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate these spaces and I'd like to see my time spent in those ways. And so I hope to connect with all of you. Follow me and I'll follow you back so that we can continue these dialogues. And so I just want to give a few minutes if anyone else has anything that would maybe close us out and take us on into our days collectively that you want to share. Spiritually, she and I have connected. Follow her. She's got some good
Yeah.
lives where we're talking about the same things. So I'll just turn the platform over to you guys if you guys have got some closing thoughts to kind of close out our time together.
No, I just want us to hold on to that thought that we are all seeds and everything we need is
I just want
implanted inside of us,
oh, okay.
Yeah. We're all seeds. We are. We can choose to be good seeds or weeds in life. We
Yeah,
can choose.
that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. The choice is ours.
Right.
Spiritually jump
And
in. Feel free.
uh, that's
Elon?
100%. Yeah, can you hear me? I know
Yeah.
I was having some
Yeah.
issues
We
before.
got you.
Sound.
You good.
Okay. Um all right. Well, no, I would love thank you, Kenny Pops, for that because that's paramount. And also understanding that you're a seed and understanding that all the tools you have are within, you have to activate those tools. So when you
Yes.
spend time with self-healing, that is the best way to activate it. You can't activate yourself if you don't know yourself. So learn yourself all over again
Yes.
outside of distractions that we have. Learn who you are as an individual, not what else societal norms say. That's how we got to break away from it. It's all habit. Everyone or most people in this society, especially on this continent, have been, born and then they tell you you're a sinner automatically. Throw
Yeah.
that out the window
Yeah.
because you're not. You are loved, not a sin. You are not born to sin. That's ridiculous, and that's how they convince people to do all of these things.
Yeah.
Go seek truth within yourself. You are full of love. You're full of light, and the moment that you connect to that, you're gonna spread it like wildfire. And that's
Yes.
just what my personal experience. I've gone through at least 6 lives in my 42 years. I feel like I have lived many times over. And each experience, I learned something new about myself. I learned a lot about the society around me. I've always been a people watcher and an observer. And I was one of those people that never fit in. I've never allowed myself to be placed in anyone's box specific because I was looking at those boxes and I was like, oh no, that's not for me.
Yes.
But then I got into the box in a way working those 16-hour days and burning myself out. And then when I realized that I had lost myself, like I knew myself for a long time, but then I worked so much, I forgot about taking care of myself and I got lost. So when I realized, like, hey, where are you? I had to snap back into my reality, which is definitely outside of this actual world that we're living in, and then start making moves to assist other people in their transition into that, and having that ego death that we all need in order to really thrive in and make change, because a lot of it is ego driven. Once
You
we get rid of all of that ego and the need to make other people wrong if they don't agree with what we're saying or feeling or doing, then we would have a easier time with communication. And if people communicated in a healthier way with each other, there would be more love spread because there's understanding. You know, if you're not practicing deep listening, then you're listening to respond to what this person is saying and how the first thing that came out of their mouths made you feel, instead of actually listening to everything that came out of their mouth and learning to just understand that they don't have to feel like you do. They don't have to think like you do. They don't have to agree with you, as long as they're not placing judgment and pushing themselves and their beliefs on you. If we could all understand that, I think we would already be taking a step in the right direction. Just understanding that people are allowed to be themselves and allowed to be different without judgment, and learning to accept it. It's like, hey, you know what? You feel this way. I feel this way. I accept that you feel that way. And I still love you and want the best for you. I don't need to make you feel like I feel, and once we respect each other and respect those boundaries, communication will go along a much further distance, and because we will have a mutual respect. If you learn to understand and live with compassion, I think that that is just a step in the right direction. But we all got to, make those changes and look within, to connect with ourselves, because a lot of what we're
I,
doing is what's acceptable to other people and society. So I thank you for
I want
that
to
time. I'm
change that
sorry.
into the
I was
words.
just kind of
I
rambling
thank
on a
you for
little bit.
sharing. No, no, no.
Once I
I
get
want to
going,
change that.
I talk a
I
lot.
want to change that into the paradigm model from a shifter's perspective. A shifter would say, or the perspective, that room, like Kenny Pop, go into that other room so you get a different perspective. From a shifting perspective, I would say exactly what you just said in this way. Can you imagine what life would be like if we were able to live with people who were able to have more than one right answer for how we do life? And we were
yeah,
able to live with each other where we were able to allow us each to get to our best life using the tools that were resonated with us. Can you imagine what life would be like
yes.
if we could do
I just
that?
got the chill at the thoughts. I just got chills at the thought. Like if everybody was just allowed to trust their own process, if
If
everybody was
we
just
could
allowed to
live,
It's
trust
coming.
their own process.
because that is that
It's
piece
coming.
of being a shifter, that is that
Yes.
mapping. Do I have the ability in pictures or words or drawings or models that explain what I found in my exploration of the future? When I
Yeah.
anticipate what our future paradigm looks like, my non negotiable vision is that we must create communities where
Yeah.
we begin, where my grandchildren's children only know that they are supported in a life embracing environment where they are given the freedom and the opportunity and the tools to live in love. That's the
Yes.
vision. Now, the
And
other
what you
part of
said
that is,
about that
can I map
ego,
the
what you said
bridge?
about the death of the ego, though, I didn't even know that was a real thing until I had to go through it. I didn't
How
even
about if
realize that
my
the reality
grandson,
that I was living in was a false narrative that I had created based off of traumas and hurts and pains and failures. You know what I'm saying? And everything, none of it was real. It was just my thought.
the vision is, what if my grandson only knew the ego free living? What if that was
Yes.
his
I
norm?
love it.
For
I
me, the
love it.
reality
Ego
is,
free living. I gotta put that on a t-shirt. Ego
what
free
if he
living. I
knew
like
nothing
that.
of it? The reality is change is slow, and my hope is for my grandchildren's children. What if my grandchildren's children, what if this ego stuff was so strange to them that it caused them to cringe when they saw it? What if they
Oh,
only knew love? Like, that's the vision. Is what's the
mm,
reality? Change is slow, but that's the vision. And then I think the last thing when spiritually was talking that brought up is one of the examples. A mirror always works. I don't care how much mud you put on that mirror, the mirror still works. And
I'm
so, what we
telling
have
you.
to do in our own lives is we have to take the mud, the garbage off of our lives. That's those layers. When we
Yeah,
peel those layers off, what I have found is what that has given me is the freedom to love. That even when times were going to be difficult with people who had hurt me and would try to hurt me again because they were damaged, my mama,
yeah, yeah,
I had the freedom to say, but who am I? I
yeah,
am a loving person. I do not have to have my defenses up because there's no threat. My spirit
yeah,
will live on. My spirit will be fine. There's no threat to me. I only put up defenses if I'm afraid and have to be. And so for me, my life is like when I do that looking in the mirror, that my goal is that more and more I get that mud off the mirror and I see the true me and that I have the freedom to live that. For me,
yeah,
that's the struggle. The Black Butterfly is a song that's dear to me. Tell your sons and daughters what the struggle brings. Healing is hard. I ain't gonna lie to
yeah,
nobody and tell them it's not. It's hard, and right now it ain't popular. It is not popular. That fad stuff to people talking about, that ain't the real deep healing that we need to do. It's better than nothing, but it ain't deep healing. If you go deep, it's hard. But she says,
yeah,
tell your sons and daughters what the struggle brings. The struggle brings freedom. I get to choose to be the loving self I am at the core without having to live through the poison of my damage. It's
yeah,
valuable to me. It has changed my life. Where when I look at life, even bad stuff that happens, it's like, it happened, and you move through it and decide how much energy do I want to spend into being mad? Nope, I don't want to spend no more energy being mad. Nope,
none,
nope, nope, nope.
none.
What I'm gonna do is set some boundaries. You
Yeah,
can't come in my space because you toxic. Nope,
yeah,
nope,
yeah,
nope.
yeah,
Cut, 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 cut,
yeah.
cut. So thank you all for letting me share
No,
with you.
thank
Thank you
you,
for
thank
sharing
you,
together
thank you.
with me in
Yeah,
this process. Heal, heal, heal. It's an
you,
investment for you that gives a gift to everyone you come into contact with. But your
yeah,
first priority is you, and you deserve that gift of love. You deserve to return to that place where you too can live life through a loved perspective. So I encourage you, if you want to heal together, holla at me. But
yeah,
by all means, find the things that resonate with you on healing. If you need help, reach out. But find things that mean healing for you and do it at the pace that you can, but hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
yeah.
We need you to
What
hurry
you
up,
say, but hurry
hurry up.
up.
All right, guys, have a great day. I'm
Thank
going to
you.
go
You
ahead
have a
into my
beautiful
day.
day as well, Goddess.
Enjoyed you all. Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye bye. You said do it at your own pace, but hurry up.